Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the What If guy, back with another fanfiction. This is the movie of What If Issei joins Supernatural Academy. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Deep within the heart of the lush, verdant forest, a mischievous band of yokai gathered. These lively pranksters hadn't quite grasped the subtle nuances of the phrase, personal space. Their sole purpose in existence seemed to be derived from tormenting and frightening creatures of other species. Today, they had a prime target in their crosshairs, a lone human, practically ringing the dinner bell with every step he took. At the helm of this approaching chaos was none other than a wily kitsune, her bushy tails twitching like hyperactive, extremely fuzzy snakes. She sensed the approaching human with the precision of a bloodhound on a scent trail. Grinning from ear to pointy ear, the yokai advanced, their excitement evident as they inched closer to their quarry. But then, in a collective moment of clarity that would go down in yokai history, they all decided in unspoken agreement that perhaps this particular human was a tad too challenging. It was a classic case of let's not get punted to the heavens syndrome, a rule etched into their folklore through generations of unfortunate pranking attempts. So, in a synchronized frenzy, they executed a lightning-fast about-face and bolted back to whence they came. And there he stood, the unwitting protagonist in this supernatural sitcom, amid the towering trees, his heart racing as if he'd just survived a marathon on a caffeine overdose. Sweat dripped from his furrowed brow, mingling with the forest grime that clung to his body like a clingy X. His unremarkable brown hair resembled a bird's nest after a particularly wild party, and his dull brown eyes scanned the forest, their main emotion being confusion, and maybe just a dash of annoyance at his unexpected workout interruption. With a nonchalant shrug, our intrepid hero resumed his workout routine. If one could call it a routine, that is. It was more like a spectacle, a baffling display of physical prowess that defied all logical explanation, even in a world teeming with magic. Because there was nothing magical in his exercise. Hayudu Issei continued with what he fondly referred to as the synchronized tree hug. In a feat of sheer insanity, he embraced not one, not two, but an entire grove of trees simultaneously, like some sort of arborous octopus. His rippling muscles strained against the bark as he performed this arboreal interpretive dance. Birds perched in the branches above watched in a mix of awe and terror as their homes trembled with each tree-hugging embrace. After several reps, he transitioned into the boulder bop. He located a massive boulder, 4 times his size, and began to dance around it like an overly enthusiastic partner in a salsa class. With each twirl, he kicked the boulder, and to the utter disbelief of gravity itself, the colossal rock soared into the air, spinning like a demented UFO. Issei followed its trajectory, doing a series of mid-air somersaults before catching the boulder with one hand and slamming it back into the ground. The forest floor trembled, and the bewildered animals began to suspect that their realm had been invaded by a particularly bewildering hurricane. Throughout this madness, Issei maintained a stoic expression, as if levitating logs and juggling boulders were the most ordinary activities in the world. And as he completed his workout that defied all logic, one couldn't help but wonder if there was a method to his madness or if he was simply living in a world of his own, one where trees were his friends, gravity was optional, and truck-sized boulders made excellent props for a circus act. And as he finished his workout with a triumphant, satisfied smirk for another day well done, the forest stood still, the animals rendered utterly speechless by the spectacle they had just witnessed. Issei wiped a bead of sweat from his brow, completely unaware that his daily exercise routine had officially transcended the realm of the ludicrous and entered the annals of the surreal. All done, he huffed with satisfaction, a glint of perverse determination in his eyes as he declared his next goal. Time for porn. With the grace of a gazelle on caffeine, he bolted towards Kuo City. His speed defied the laws of physics, leaving behind a trail of befuddled squirrels and bewildered birds and panicking yokai that believed he was chasing after them. His destination? A humble newsstand tucked away in the city's bustling heart, the sacred repository of knowledge for connoisseurs of the art of hot women's anatomy, this month's edition of the renowned Legacy of the Issei Dragon. In this supernatural carnival of a world, where devils, demons, angels, and regular folks, along with those extraordinary heroic descendants, all shared the same earthly sandbox, a peculiar kind of harmony had settled in. Earth, heaven, hell, Asgard, Olympus, and plenty more had collectively agreed to set aside their squabbles, courtesy of a motley crew. Some guy from the Grigori Institution, a handful of Satans running the show in hell, and the ever-reliable Archangel Michael, who was temporarily filling in for God, who was presumably lounging in the celestial equivalent of a hammock in the higher dimensions, sipping on divine piña coladas for a job well done. But amidst this grand action sitcom, our protagonist, Hayudu Issei, was what you might call a manamizer. While everyone else was tapping into their or Earth's plentiful winds of magic, or mana for short, Issei was the guy with the wand of envy, capable of turning the most powerful magic wand into a backscratcher. Issei's upbringing had been nothing short of a whimsical fairy tale, albeit one penned by a particularly quirky author. His parents, who he lovingly referred to as Pops and Mumsy, were your garden-variety magic enthusiasts. Yet for some reason, they decided that living in a remote forest miles away from civilization, specifically Kuo City, was the epitome of the good life. This hidden paradise was expertly concealed from prying eyes, courtesy of a mysterious Japanese deity who preferred to remain incognito for now. And as for Issei, he simply rolled with it, content in his blissful ignorance. The reason behind their hermit-like existence remained an unsolved puzzle that he didn't care to solve. Issei's eccentricity didn't stop at his mind-boggling workouts. Oh no, he had a quirkier side, cultivated by years of living in isolation with his peculiar parents, his closest confidant being a barn owl who occasionally mistook him for a predatory creature, unless he came bearing breadcrumbs, of course. But perhaps the crowning jewel in the eccentricity crown was the frustration born from his parents' uncanny ability to dodge any questions about their peculiar living situation. Why in the middle of nowhere? Where the chances of finding himself a girl, let alone a girlfriend that would let him do stuff, were roughly on par with discovering a unicorn riding a pogo stick. My goal? Simple. I want to assemble a harem of supernatural beauties. And I've got this grand plan to get there, by getting powerful first. The rest? I'll figure it out on the fly. Or so I hope. His lofty goal, fueled by a heady concoction of teenage hormones, romanticized notions, and a dash of delirium, was a beacon of ambition that gleamed like a lighthouse guiding him through the stormy seas of his eccentric life. And according to his father, with the conviction of a true visionary, the path to this peculiar dream was paved by a tar called power. He'd figure out the logistics later, presumably over a cup of tea with his ever-slimy parents and a befuddled barn owl. And as he sprinted toward Kuo City with a singular mission in mind, he couldn't help but wonder if today would be the day when destiny would finally reveal itself in the form of a hentai magazine. As Issei arrived at the bustling heart of Kuo City, he hastily donned his trusty maroon and white tracksuit, with its symbolic 3 white stripes. It was one of the many hand-me-downs from his father. Remarkably, it still retained its pristine condition thanks to his mother's magical touch. And like his usual fashion choices, which seemed to scream fashion crisis, the tracksuit clung to him like a paper bag, roughly and slightly oversized thanks to his compact stature. As he entered the city limits, he couldn't help but marvel at the kaleidoscope of races and species that mingled in the urban sprawl. People of all kinds, from humans to devils, angels to beings from realms with names he likely would get tongue-twisted, strolled the streets. Can't they just use their hands? A stray thought wandered into his breast-invested mind as he observed his surroundings. Magic, a commonplace tool here, was used for the most mundane tasks. Someone summoned a floating umbrella to shield themselves from an imaginary drizzle, while another turned their coffee cup into a scuttling spider just for kicks. Issei, with his manamizer status, couldn't quite comprehend why they were bending over backward, sometimes literally, to employ magic. But he wasn't here to philosophize about the magical intricacies of city life. He felt as if Kuo City was stuck in a never-ending magic show, and he was the only audience member who didn't receive the memo. But he didn't have the luxury to stand around pondering the mysteries of magical hairdryers. His parents had adamantly warned him never to visit the city, and although he respected their wishes, ever since he stumbled upon a very specific magazine, disguised as a historical tome, no less, with a smoking hot, scantily clad angel, which was just a fallen angel who painted their wings black, posing seductively on the cover, hidden under his father's bed, his curiosity and, soon enough, desire had become an insatiable beast. It had gnawed at his every waking moment, driving him to risk the wrath of parental admonition for the sake of that monthly issue. With a promise to himself to return quickly, he set off on his noble quest. And got completely sidetracked in a heartbeat as a vision of exotic allure sauntered past him. A demon girl from the Leporine clan. She was the epitome of supernatural allure, a bronze-skinned beauty with long, tantalizing legs, cascades of snowy white hair that brushed her shoulders, fluffy rabbit ears perched atop her head, and a cheeky pair of elven ears that peeked out like secretive accomplices. Why did her kind have 2 sets of ears? He had no idea. One thing he knew, being the eager connoisseur of the supernatural and a pervert, found himself unable to tear his gaze away. His eyes practically laser-locked onto the mesmerizing spectacle of her firm hips, causing him to momentarily forget his sacred quest for the elusive adult magazine as he pondered the chance of getting his head smushed between those tantalizing bronze thighs. A glance was all it needed to drive his imagination to overdrive as he conjured a whirlwind of fantastical scenarios, each more absurd and tantalizing than the last. A nudge from the rational part of his brain finally jolted Issei back to his senses. With a self-imposed mental slap, he reminded himself of his mission, a mission of utmost importance, at least in his hormone-fueled mind. He couldn't afford to be sidetracked any longer, not when the clock was ticking, and the magazine he sought was presumably awaiting his eager arrival. With renewed determination and the image of the Leporine girl imprinted firmly in his memory, Issei resumed his jog through the city. He would return to his forested sanctuary soon, magazine in hand. Issei arrived at the bookstand with all the subtlety of a teenage boy on a mission. The influence of the fallen angels over the red light district had turned this otherwise discreet shop into a spectacle, openly displaying its adult content for all to see. But Issei couldn't care less about the lack of modesty, all the better anyway. Since everyone was stunning in their own supernatural ways, his mind was nonetheless fixated on a singular book. Although it took his entire willpower to control his thoughts from wandering into the labyrinth of erotic books that beckoned seductively from the shelves, he spotted what he had come for, the monthly issues of the Issei Dragon. It had the bright pink magical girl Leviathan on its cover, but he knew that it was just a cross-promotional material to get his hopes up. Nevertheless, with a triumphant grin, he plucked it from its place, his fingers handling it with a mix of anticipation and reverence. As he strutted towards the cashier, the shop's owner as well as guardian of sensuality, Calla Warner, regarded him with a knowing smirk. She was a fallen angel, a temptress who thrived in this tantalizing domain. Tall and buxom, her brown eyes hinted at a mischievous secret, and her long, navy blue hair cascaded like a silken waterfall, concealing one eye, leaving the other to convey her playful nature. Her attire was a maroon coat-like top that hinted at danger and a matching miniskirt that oozed sexy office lady. More importantly, at least for him, her trench coat was unapologetically open at the chest, showcasing her ample chest and cleavage, adorned with a gold necklace around her neck, gleaming like an invitation for his eyes. Never late, huh? Calla Warner arched an eyebrow, her voice laced with amusement as she scanned his choice. Hey, eyes are up here, kiddo. Issei, undeterred and seemingly immune to subtlety, responded with a simple point, his gaze remaining steadfast. Yeah, but your goods are down there. Calla Warner couldn't help but chuckle. Huh, there needs to be more people like you. With a playful wink, she slipped something extra inside the brown paper bag containing his prized possession. Here, she said, handing it over to him, something a little extra for your loyalty. Issei accepted the bag with an eager grin and wasted no time peeking inside. Awesome! Whatever surprise lay within that tiny box was an added bonus to his already successful mission. As he made his payment with an extra bounce in his step, he strutted out of the store, An unspoken promise of returning next month for another rendezvous with temptation and the ever-enticing Calawarner. Issei emerged from the store, his stride full of newfound confidence. His mission had been accomplished, and the bonus from Calawarner had made the trip even more worthwhile. He couldn't help but feel that today was a particularly good day, despite his parents' warnings about venturing into the city. As he strolled through the city park on his way back, he noticed a thick crowd congregating around a grand, ornate fountain. It was evident that a street performer was at the center of this spectacle, and the curiosity that had led him here spurred him forward. With a flourish of his cape and a dazzling display of sparks, the performer summoned a cascade of glowing butterflies into the air. The ethereal creatures danced in harmony with the performer's whimsical gestures, captivating the attention of the passerby, including Issei. The guy without magic found himself drawn to the spectacle. His eyes widened as he gazed at the radiant display, his curiosity piqued by the enchanting dance of the butterflies, wondering if he could pluck one and keep it as a pet, his innate musing broadening the subject to wondering if these butterflies had predators. What would they be? Glowing iguanas? As Issei stood there, enchanted by the ethereal dance of the butterflies, a sharp-eyed individual in the crowd, someone particularly keen of magical senses, sensed something amiss. With a furrowed brow and a growing suspicion, they began to scrutinize Issei's presence, their magical perception honed like a finely tuned instrument. In this world where magic was woven into the very fabric of existence, the absence of mana was as conspicuous as a rainbow in a monochrome world. And it didn't take long for this perceptive individual to arrive at a startling conclusion. Issei was hiding his mana, a grave offense that went beyond the boundaries of legality. With a voice that cut through the hushed awe of the onlookers, the accuser pointed an accusatory finger at Issei. "You there! What are you hiding?" they demanded, their tone laced with both authority and suspicion. "Mana concealment is a crime, you know." It took Issei a glance to realize that finger wasn't pointing at someone behind him, but at him. Me? He then stared down at his brown paper bag and instinctively clutched it tighter. "I ain't hiding anything from anything." Issei's bewildered protest was cut short as someone in the crowd, misinterpreting the situation entirely, jumped to a bombastic conclusion. "He has a bomb." Chaos erupted like a tempest. The tranquil park was transformed into a pandemonium of fear and frantic movement. The startled crowd scattered in all directions, like leaves caught in a sudden gust of wind, nearly emptying the once-packed park in a matter of seconds. Amidst the panic, his accusator, an officer in white uniform, known as a sentinel, which was really just a cooler term for magic police, stepped forward. Nervously, he pointed his wand at Issei, conjuring tiny magical circles before his mouth and ears. As he spoke into these arcane channels, he called for urgent backup, his voice trembling with the weight of the situation. "Attention all units," he said, his words amplified by the enchanted circles. "Potential threat in the park. Suspect accused of mana concealment. Suspected bomb threat, potential Cows Brigade affiliation. Requesting immediate backup." "Wait." Issei raised his arms, still clutching his bag. Having read this scene from his many books as he smoothly read the name tag on the officer's chest. "Officer Takashi. This is all just one giant misunderstanding. What I have is just a book." The sentinel's wand wavered slightly as he took in Issei's plea, but didn't buy it. "Don't you move." The park had fallen eerily silent, save for the distant hum of magical activity and the tension that hung in the air like a charged storm. "If you don't believe me, then have a look," Issei said, his voice earnest. As he tossed the paper bag toward Officer Takashi, who emitted a non-magical high-pitched shriek that could have shattered glass, making it seem like he'd suddenly sprouted pigtails complete with pink ribbons. With a frightened wave of his wand, he unleashed a bolt of fire magic, aiming it directly at the tossed bag. But what shocked the poor sentinel more was what Issei did. His instincts kicking into high gear, with a swiftness that defied belief, Issei burst forward, patting the fireball away like it was a casual game of beach volleyball, guiding it harmlessly off course. In one fluid motion, he snatched his bag out of the air, fixing the officer with a somewhat annoyed look. "Hey, Careful, Issei scolded, exasperated. These things cost money, you know. Officer Takashi, his face a mosaic of sheer horror, had gone from panic to full-blown meltdown. All units. Requesting immediate backup. Pronto. Amid the chaos and befuddlement, Issei's smooth brain, always reliable in moments of questionable judgment, seized control. Without any further ado, he made a split-second decision that, to him, seemed utterly sensible, running like a gazelle fleeing a particularly ambitious magic-infused cheetah. With a burst of adrenaline-fueled energy, he launched himself into a sprint, leaving Officer Takashi utterly stupefied in his wake. Issei's track shorts did their best impression of an afterthought as his feet thundered against the ground, creating a rhythmic drumbeat of escape. As dust billowed like a storm, the sentinel's jaw practically grazed the ground, his eyes expanding to the size of dinner plates as Issei vanished into the horizon before he could even utter a single word. As he staggered back, beads of cold sweat trickling down his furrowed brow, the seasoned officer felt like he'd narrowly avoided a collision with a speeding freight train. Retirement was suddenly looking quite appealing, and he contemplated the merits of an early exit from the world of magical policing. His escape had not gone unnoticed, even in the chaotic maelstrom of dust he created. High above, a majestic raven, a familiar, a creature bound to the will of a master, silently tracked his every move, its sharp eyes locked onto the fleeting figure below. In a dimly lit room filled with a myriad of screens displaying scenes from across the city, a man in a fedora leaned forward in his chair, his smirk betraying a sense of exhilaration. Finally, Danzydanz mused, some entertainment. Years of diligent service had rewarded him with his lofty position, but the daily grind had left him yawning with boredom. Yet watching the young man's mad dash through the city park, Danzyg's grin broadened. With the precision of a seasoned strategist, he began coordinating his familiar, directing it to keep a vigilant eye on the presumed young terrorist's hideout. And it was the best mistake of his life. But Issei, his heart now beating steadily and thinking absolutely nothing of what had happened due to his limited interaction with the outside world, approached the quaint cabin, the one place in the world he truly considered home. Before entering, however, he discreetly stashed the magazine and the extra gift from Calawarner beneath his tracksuit and pocket respectively, feeling like they were some sort of contraband he needed to smuggle past a stern border patrol, namely, Mickey Hayu. "Pops, Mumsy, I'm back," Issei called out, doing his best to sound casual despite the whirlwind of events he'd just experienced. "Just finished my training, and I'm heading for a quick shower." "Welcome back, sweetie. Good work again today, boy." His parents, in the midst of their magical endeavors, acknowledged his return with brief greetings. They were well accustomed to their son's routine and peculiarities. With the grace of a seasoned spy, Issei tiptoed through the living room and up the stairs. His mother, Mickey, occupied a cozy corner, her fingers moving with the grace of a master as she knitted a warm sweater destined to be cozier than a dragon's den, thanks to her enchantments. Meanwhile, his father, Goru, was knee-deep in what Issei affectionately dubbed fatherly mysteries. This enigmatic term encompassed a medley of odd experiments and tinkering with peculiar magical contraptions, an everyday occurrence in their enchantment-infused abode. Issei's entry went unnoticed, a common state of affairs in their magical household, where everyday life unfolded against a backdrop of magical charms, elixirs, and eccentric incantations. With ninja-worthy stealth, he slipped into his room, his clandestine magazine still concealed beneath his attire. As he closed the door behind him, he couldn't help but marvel at the outlandishness of his day. From a simple quest for adult entertainment to a high-speed park escapade, it was shaping up to be a day like no other in his mana-challenged existence. And now, to savor the day. Nai-hi-hi. Issei's gremlin chuckle filled the room as he retrieved his prized contraband and the small box gifted by Calawarner, a gel that promised heightened pleasure. He stared at the mysterious gel for a moment, perplexed by its potential applications, and then placed it inside a small trinket box. "I'll figure that one out later," he muttered to himself with a mischievous grin. With the anticipation of a treasure hunter unveiling a long-lost artifact, Issei now held the magazine before him, Legacy of a Pay Dragon. He admired it with pride, his fingers itching to tear off the plastic cover and delve into its contents. But just as he was about to embark on his evening of indulgence, fate had other plans. A thunderous crash reverberated through the cabin as its door was blown open from the outside with a surge of magic. His moment of blissful solitude was shattered, and he found himself facing an unexpected and undoubtedly noisy interruption. Did Mom find Dad's stash again? He idly wondered, taking a cautious peek from his bedroom door. To his surprise, the scene unfolding before him was far from the usual domestic drama. 3 unwelcome guests had invited themselves into the living room, their authoritative presence rendering the air thick with tension. Leading this impromptu intrusion was a fallen angel with a striking appearance, for black wings and a jauntily perched fedora atop his head. The glint in his eyes hinted at a thrilling hunt, and Issei couldn't help but feel that his hope for a peaceful evening was being thrown outside the window. 2 others accompanied the fallen angel. Issei immediately recognized Officer Takashi among them, but the fallen angel woman at his side was impossible to ignore. She wore a modified sentinel uniform that accentuated her provocative and dangerous aura. The attire was form-fitting, leaving little to the imagination, with a white top that clung to her voluptuous figure, the collar daringly open to reveal a tantalizing hint of her ample cleavage. Her matching miniskirt hugged her hips, showcasing her long, shapely legs, clad nicely in black tights. Her silky raven hair cascaded straight down her back like black silk, framing a face that bore an air of exquisite beauty. Sharp violet eyes held a captivating intensity, hinting at her cunning and predatory nature. Her lips, painted a seductive shade of crimson, seemed to curl into a perpetual smirk. "They look like regular hermits," Danzydanz, Rainier commented casually, dismissing any notion of strangeness. "Maybe they just prefer the quiet life." "He's here," Danzydanz declared firmly, his gaze narrowing. "You too, searched the house for him?" "Yes, sir." Officer Takashi nodded obediently, his usual carefree demeanor replaced by a sense of duty as he embarked on his house-hunting mission. Rainier fluttered away with a nonchalant hum. The room's tension continued to escalate, and Miki Hayadu couldn't conceal her fear. She turned to Danzydanz with a trembling voice. "Officer, what's all this about? Have we done something wrong?" Danzydanz offered an explanation, though cryptic and enigmatic. "All in good time. But for now, we're looking for a suspicious individual whom we believe to have affiliation with the Cows Brigade." "Cows? What?" Gora Hayadu, now playing the role of the protective husband, inquired with bemusement. He held his wife close, trying not to provoke the sentinels. "With all due respect, sir, we don't have anyone like that here. We don't even know what that is." Danzydanz shot them an incredulous look. "Have you two been on a permanent camping trip?" Goro couldn't resist a smirk. "Well, our house is in the middle of a nameless forest and we've been here for the past couple decades. I suppose the comparison isn't too far off." The chief sentinel paused, his irritation and amusement warring on his face. "Right?" Danzydanz conceded with a cough. "My apologies. But we tracked the suspicious character here and he's—" "Is this him?" Rainier's voice came from the second floor, somehow sounding both amused and bemused at the same time as she tugged Issei's ear. "This pervert that had just blatantly asked me my 3 sizes?" Both Miki and Goro face-bombed. The abrupt identification by Rainier left Danzydanz momentarily flabbergasted. He blinked at Issei, who remained undeterred in his ogling of the lieutenant's assets, wearing a leering grin that could rival a Cheshire cat's. "Yes, that is him," Danzydanz muttered, his initial confidence melting away like ice cream in the summer sun. He couldn't quite believe what he was witnessing. "Takashi!" "Confirmation?" "Sir." Officer Takashi, who had been diligently searching the house, reappeared from the kitchen, having found no sign of a hidden fugitive under the cupboards. His expression quickly shifted from determination to sheer panic as he pointed a trembling finger at the unfazed brown-haired leecher. If that's him." The situation had gone from mildly absurd to utterly surreal in a matter of moments, leaving everyone in the room questioning their own sanity. A long exhale was held. "Ma'am, sir," Danzydanz said, attempting to regain some semblance of authority. Does your child possess any peculiar proclivity for improvised explosives, perchance? Mickey and Goro exchanged bemused glances. None that we know of, officer. All right. Danzydanz nodded as he turned his attention to Rainier, his brow furrowing with a mixture of disappointment and relief. And you, Rainier? What did you find in his room? Rainier shrugged, still pinching Issei's ear. Nothing that screams he's a terrorist. He's just a kid. With lots of magazines. But unless we're charging someone for the possession of pornographic materials, hey, that was uncalled for. Issei wailed, feeling a cold sweat starting to bead as he was now the target of his mother's withering glare. Rainier, undeterred, continued her assessment. Then I don't think we'll be making any grand arrest as you've promised me today, Danzydanz. The chief sentinel let out a weary sigh, realizing the enormity of his misunderstanding. With a flick of his hand, he summoned a shimmering curtain of magic, and the blasted door floated back to its hinges, mending the shattered entrance as if it had never been damaged. Sorry about the door, he mumbled, his voice tinged with chagrin. We'll be on our way. False alarm, it seems. However, Officer Takashi remained resolute. But sir, he concealed his mana. The color drained from the Hayadu parents' faces as they realized the potential implications. Meanwhile, Issei was still savoring the memory of the hot officer's cleavage, committed to future material. Enough, Takashi. You want to embarrass me further? Danzydanz said, causing the yokai sentinel to shrink. Though Danzydanz did recall the matter, he nodded slowly. Do remind your son that it's highly inadvisable to conceal his mana, Danzydanz advised sternly. Especially now, with the entire world on high alert for dangerous individuals. Mr. and Mrs.? Hi, sir, Goro responded with gratitude. And, sir, this'll be the last time. Rainier, amused by the absurdity of the situation, couldn't help but chuckle softly. Unless he's one of those manaless folks, that is. Mickey and Goro paled further. They paled even more as Issei obliviously asked, "What's wrong with that?" Danzydanz, after recovering from the surreal events, cleared his throat. Well, young man, he began, addressing Issei, it's very unusual to not have mana in a world full of magic. Your lack of mana is a matter of concern. With a wave of his hand, Danzydanz attempted to scan Issei for mana once more, only to find the result unchanged. Unconceal your mana, boy, he instructed. I still can't detect it from you. Issei blinked. How could he hide something he didn't have? Danzyg's scanning spell continued to register no mana from Issei, and he frowned deeply. This is highly irregular, he muttered to himself, slowly turning over to the parents. Have you been hiding a blemish in our society, Mr. and Mrs. Hayadu? The color drained from the Hayadu parents' faces as their nightmare came to life. Goro's voice quivered as he implored Danzydanz, his words carrying the weight of a father's despair. Officer, please, you have to understand. He's our son. We love him. Mickey's voice joined her husband's, her eyes welling with tears, taking him away from us. It's not fair. Please, there must be another way. Danzydanz, despite his earlier bluster, felt a pang of sympathy as he witnessed the parents' genuine anguish. Yet, he knew the law was unyielding in this matter. I'm sorry, he said, his voice laced with regret. But the law is clear. We cannot allow someone without mana to exist in our society. It's a danger we cannot ignore. But what's so bad about that? Issei asked, still oblivious to the gravity of the situation, not getting why everyone was making such a fuss about his lack of magical mojo. And you're not taking me anywhere without the approval of my parents, Fedora guy. I ain't leaving with you. And he won't be going anywhere, his parents suddenly declared in unison, and drew out their wands. The room crackled with tension as a clash of magic erupted, and Danzydanz took charge, his lightsaber-like weapon slicing through the firebolt and ice bolt spells with precision, splitting the weak spells with ease. Neutralize them, he commanded urgently. Incapacitate. Do not harm them. Rainier gracefully left Issei and leaped to the floor, her 4 black wings spreading and then retracting as they aided her movements. She summoned a violet spear made of light, ready for combat. Meanwhile, Takashi conjured his yujitsu, a unique form of magic known only to his kind, seeping purple mist that coiled around the hiatus. "Runze!" Miki shouted, her voice tinged with desperation as her magic weakened in the presence of the strange purple mist. The family understood that the sentinels didn't mean to harm them, which was precisely why they needed to make use of this opportunity. "Runson, we'll be all right. Get the kid," Rainier instructed Takashi, her light spear crackling with energy. With a swift movement, she sent a jolt of electricity toward the parents, not to harm them but to surprise and incapacitate. Miki and Goru winced in surprise rather than pain. Danasik and Rainier kept their attention on the adult hiatus as Takashi rushed forward to capture Issei. It appeared that today was the rare day when he defied his parents' orders not once but twice. "Come with me and now, Blarga." Officer Takashi could be heard yelling as he cartwheeled across the house, leaving a gaping hole in the wall and sending the bewildered sentinel on an impromptu tour of the neighboring trees. The stunned silence that followed was thick enough to slice with a butter knife, as everyone, sentinels included, wondered if a meteor had struck the house sideways. Mickey's knitting needles hovered mid-air, Goru's magical contraptions that were simply glorified alarm clocks ceased their erratic whirring, and the both of them collectively wondered if they had somehow overlooked their son's secret superhero training regimen amidst their enchantment-filled lives. "So," Issei muttered, his knuckles still crackling with unfathomable power, his flippant brown eyes now glinting with an edge of danger. "Who's next in line for the dirt sandwich?" Danasik and Rainier exchanged a glance, unspoken thoughts passing between them as they assessed the situation and the formidable teenager before them. It was clear that things had taken an unforeseen turn, and Issei had no intention of cooperating. Rainier chuckled softly, her eyes glittering with amusement as she took a step forward, her light spear poised for action. Well, it seems we've stumbled upon quite the anomaly, Danasik. Shall we see just how much dirt this young man can dish out?" Danasik, with his fedora perched at a rakish angle on his head, nodded in agreement. "I believe we shall, Rainier. This might turn out to be an eventful evening after all. After you." As Rainier prepared to launch her light spear like a javelin at the audacious teenager, Goru and Miki, who had been momentarily stunned by the unfolding spectacle, suddenly snapped out of their stupor. Their parental instincts kicked into overdrive. "Say, no," they exclaimed in unison, their voices filled with desperation and fear that lost steam midway, transforming into an extended, bewildered, "oh," because their son had caught the light spear midair. His parents could hardly believe their eyes. The weapon, which had enough electric force to incapacitate a rampaging bull mammoth, seemed to have about as much effect on Issei as a gentle tickle. His brown hair stood on end from the static electricity, giving him the appearance of a particularly unruly porcupine. Rainier exchanged a profoundly perplexed glance with Danasik, questioning if she'd mistakenly thrown a dud light spear. It was as if they had been transported to a parallel universe governed by the rules of slapstick comedy. They watched in stunned silence as the young boy returned the light spear. It blazed through the space between them with the speed of an interstellar jet, slicing through the air with an otherworldly hum. Rainier's raven hair flapped dramatically as the projectile sailed past her, leaving behind a trail of bewildered sparks. Danasik, momentarily entranced by the dazzling display, contemplated whether he had accidentally wandered into a magician's circus instead of a police operation. The light spear continued its journey, leaving a pair of very confused and now highly terrified sentinels in its wake, who were now deeply questioning their own strength, training, and life choices. "Damn, I missed," Issei muttered, his voice colored with the nonchalance of someone who had just thrown a poorly aimed dart in a pub. "I won't miss next time, though." Rainier, having narrowly escaped the prospect of having her upper frame turned into pink mist, couldn't help but be relieved. She promptly sank to her knees, her recovery far from graceful. Danasik sensed the gravity of the situation and the undeniable power that Issei possessed, and quickly realized that he needed to change his approach. He and Rainier could at least hold back against town-level disaster level, but the kid was undoubtedly several grades above. He couldn't afford to let this anomaly slip away or become an actual threat. and surrendering him to the bureau seemed too much of a waste. Presented a golden opportunity. Taking a glance at Issei's parents, who were now in their 50s and looking bewildered, he saw a potential angle to exploit. "Kid," Danzydanz began, his voice edged with a seriousness that hinted at a past filled with close calls. "You've got some serious power, but the world isn't kind to those without magic. No matter what you do to me or Rainier, our higher-ups and the entire world will track you down to the ends of the earth. Your family will be in constant peril. Maybe you can handle the heat, but can your parents do the same?" With a glance at his parents, who were now reaching their 50s and had seen more than their fair share of hardships, Issei knew that he wanted nothing less than a life of peace for the people who had raised him with love and care. Mickey muttered, really questioning if she really had managed to carry this behemoth of sheer strength in her womb for 9 months. "You don't have to do this." Issei took a moment to think, his brow furrowing in deep contemplation. "No, Mumsy. I think I have to. I want you guys to live in peace." "Issei?" His father started to tear up, touched. Finally, Issei nodded. "Let's hear the deal first, Fedora Guy." Fedora Guy offered a sly smile. "What I want is simple: prestige, recognition, and opportunities. You'll enroll in an arcane academy of my choosing, and I'll be your sponsor. If you rise to the top of the ranks at this prestigious institution, or even just get in its top peerages, it will benefit me greatly. In return, I'll keep quiet about your lack of mana, handle Officer Takashi, and ensure your family lives in peace and abundance." "Like sending them to Hawaii and stuff?" Danzydanz leaned forward, a grin playing at the corner of his lips. "Yes, Hawaii and more. All expenses covered. We're talking top-tier vacations here." "Hawaii?" Goru mused, his voice tinged with dreamy nostalgia. "Hula girls, tropical drinks? I've always wanted to see that." "Go." Issei narrowed his eyes, contemplating the offer while his mother reigned in his father's daydreams with a pinch. Easy to see where he'd inherited his perverse tendency, really. Meanwhile, Rainier, seated on the floor but with a sharp eye for personal gain, chimed in as she picked herself up, her voice trembling with determination and perhaps a touch of fear. "I can help him keep his secret. File his case as undercover work. But I want my piece of the pie too, Danzydanz. As per usual, of course." Danzydanz smirked. "What do you say, kid? Does that place have hot babes?" Danzydanz smirked. "Tons." With a resolute stare, ambition blazing, Issei slid down the staircase railing with an air of casual rebellion. As he touched down at the bottom, he pointed a finger at the 2 bewildered fallen angels before him. "Say no more, should have started with that. You've got yourself a deal, mister." Goru and Mickey exchanged glances, their faces reflecting a medley of relief, gratitude, and lingering confusion about when their adorable son had evolved into a powerhouse. They couldn't help but wonder if their goddess had lent a hand in guiding their beloved boy on this unexpected path. Although, the goddess did mention their son is just a normal human, back to a time before magic took over. His moment of coolness, however, took a nosedive as Issei obliviously asked, "What's a peerage? A magical sort of porridge? I'm warning you, I'm no good at cooking." Entrance day at the renowned Arcane Academy of Belgazix was a supernatural spectacle that could rival a supernatural fashion show. The vast field buzzed with an array of students, each flaunting their magical heritage with the enthusiasm of a mystical peacock. Devils showed off their bat-like wings with an "I woke up like this" attitude, while fallen angels stretched theirs gracefully, making wing envy a thing with their black feathers. Nephilims, a dash of angelic and human cocktail, paraded with a confidence that screamed, "We got the best of both worlds," with their immaculate white feathers that seemed to have been polished with celestial conditioner. But, oh, we're just getting started on this magical buffet. Merely the opening act in this supernatural circus. Succubi, descendants of Lilith the Great Temptress, oozed sensuality with every step and twirl of their spade-tipped tail, leaving a trail of bewildered examinees who'd suddenly forgotten why they were here, lost in the succubi's heart pupils' bewitching gaze. Heavily armored Dullahans clanked about, hauling colossal magical swords that suspiciously resembled oversized flat iron bats. At least, according to one cheeky young man named Issei, who was still trying to figure out if their heads came with a detachable feature and if he could roast marshmallow on the magical flames spewing from their headless necks. Kitsunes bewitched with a charm that could convince you to sign up for a lifetime of chores and tail brushing, but hey, at least it'd be under their spell. Yukiana brought an icy coolness that had folks reaching for winter coats. Meanwhile, vampires and werewolves were engaged in a glaring contest as if they were competing for the most broody and mysterious award. It was clear that they had their own rivalries to settle, and it didn't involve who could sulk better in the corner. Greek sirens with their enchanting voices serenaded the crowd, while harpies soared above, their feathers glittering like precious gems. Norse valkyries moved gracefully through the crowd, their formidable presence felt by all. And if you thought that was all, hold on to your enchanted hats. Mythical creatures from all over the globe gatecrashed the supernatural soiree. Elegant Chinese qilins strutted their stuff, dragonborns, direct reincarnations of dragons, soared overhead, spewing breaths of ice and flames to the skies. Arabian jinni granted wishes like prose, crafty Irish fairies caused mayhem with their mischievous pranks, and Greek satyrs led a conga line that would make the gods themselves blush. It was a who's who of supernatural society, and everyone and their mythical pet had RSVP'd. But wait, there's more. The so-called heroes' descendants, a bunch of humans with pedigrees that could put your family tree to shame, proudly called themselves the Heritors. Their presence was like a glittering cherry on top of this otherworldly sundae, as if to say, we may not have wings, but our dads can beat up your dad just fine. One quirky Grim Reaper, unlike any of her peers, surfed through the air with her scythe as if it were a sleek, ebony surfboard. With a skull hoodie billowing dramatically, she carved through the skies with an effortless grace that was both eerie and oddly enchanting. Within this mystical melting pot, you could almost hear the academy grounds whispering with secrets, stories, and the promise of epic rivalries to come. In the grandstands, among the sea of extravagance, sat Goru and Mickey. Clad in attire that could be best described as conspicuously understated, they couldn't help but feel like they had accidentally wandered onto the set of a mythical fashion show. Their clothes were notably nicer, courtesy of Danasik's investment, but they still ranked a few fortune levels below other parents. Goru, who had developed a friendly rapport with Danasik after sharing a round or two of beer, leaned in, his voice laced with concern. "Do you think this is really okay, Danasik-san? They all look so powerful. I'm worried," Mickey added, her eyes darting around the crowd of flamboyantly dressed parents and their equally flamboyant offspring. His fingers casually tracing the rim of his signature fedora, his nervous habit. Danasik himself was far from convinced, wondering if he'd just delivered Issei into a death sentence. But he responded with a nonchalant shrug. "Well, let's just say your son doesn't exactly scream ordinary, either." Indeed, Issei was a spectacle unto himself. Amidst a sea of students bedecked in ornate robes and flashy magical attire, he stood out like a sloth at a sprinting competition. Clad in loose-fitting sport shirts and track pants that suggested he couldn't decide between working out or taking a nap, Issei had already become the subject of countless raised eyebrows and hushed, mystified whispers among the senior students perched in the Grand Academy building overlooking the examinees. The fact that he was obviously ogling the scantily clad examinees did not help his case as the weirdo. But this was not what made him unordinary. "Hey kid," Danasik shouted, his thunderous voice managing to snap Issei's leering gaze over the barely clothed dryads. "Don't just stand there, do your warm-ups." Snapping out of it, Issei nodded, flashed a smirk and a pair of thumbs-ups. While other examinees discreetly summoned ethereal weapons or practiced incantations to flaunt and perhaps gain recognition or even intimidate their fellow exam takers, Issei simply focused on getting himself ready. "All right," he muttered as he stretched his legs left and right, crouched, and then rocketed to the skies as he began his routine. He started with what he dubbed as Serious Series, squat to pierce the stratosphere, a maneuver that involved squatting low, raising his arms in the air as if to catch an imaginary beach ball, and then jumping high enough to rival a cannonball's trajectory, leaving his imprints on the grassy field with each powerful jump, and catching bewildered looks from the flying dragonborns, harpies, and a slew of other winged races. They blankly stared at him as he soared through the air, not meeting their gaze as he was fiercely focused on his exercise, before he made his landing that resembled a miniature meteor impact, complete with a crater. With each leap, the crater grew bigger, before he then smoothly transitioned into the serious series, sprint to nowhere, sprinting in place with such intensity that it looked like he was determined to dig a hole straight through the Earth's core. Those who watched could hardly believe their eyes, wondering if he was trying to leave a deeper crater than the one he had just created. However, Issei was nothing if not a good sport, and he promptly filled the hole back up with dirt, giving it a firm stomp to make it appear seamless. Beads of sweat glistened on his forehead, but Issei was not done. He transitioned seamlessly into a set of push-ups, his body seemingly defying gravity as he effortlessly lifted himself skyward, his limbs a blur of motion. Students nearby exchanged alarmed glances. Did he just levitate? And no, one student with dirty blonde hair stammered. He must be using Excel to push himself on and off the ground. It only looks like levitation. He might be pulling off a double, maybe even triple or quad Excel. What? It's that second-year grade spell? Well, he does look a bit older, just like most of the Dragonborns. But isn't he a human? He's a human, right? I think so. And besides, aren't you a Dragonborn yourself, Saji? His Yukiana childhood friend pointed out, the icy mist shrouding her being twirling around her white hair. You don't have to accompany me, Saji-kun. I can look after myself just fine. Well, yeah, sure, Momo-chan, but it's less about not wanting to leave you alone and more about me not wanting to get roped in with weirdos. Momo giggled serenely. And this is why I like you. Ah geez, you're gonna make me blush? Not saying you should stop, praise me more. Oblivious to the romance brewing around him, Issei went on with his extreme warm-ups. Then came the air sitting, but this wasn't a typical lounge chair affair. With one leg casually raised over the other's knee and an iron barbell loaded with magical runes on his shoulders, courtesy of Danasik's investment, Issei struck a famous thinking pose without the chair. He sat there, looking menacing and mysterious, muttering something that seemed like incantations. Those who eavesdropped realized he was reciting his favorite pizza toppings, which were predominantly rich protein. In other words, meat. The other students watched in utter amazement, convinced that Issei was tapping into some secret, strength-enhancing magic. After all, who in their right mind would believe that someone could achieve such ridiculous feats purely through physical exertion? One senior student observing the scene from the academy building turned to another with a raised eyebrow. You think he's chugging enchanted protein shakes or something? Like the ones Heracles used? His friend nodded sagely, watching as Issei suddenly executed a perfect backflip, causing a shockwave that sent nearby pebbles bouncing. Yeah, probably. But I've never seen enchanted protein shakes that can make you jump that high. Maybe they're brewed with minotaur milk or something? Wanna bet if he'll make it through? Deal. The senior devils shook hands. 5 mil. Back to the current spectacle below, Issei concluded his routine with a triumphant flourish. He stretched his arms and legs and beamed with satisfaction. With his hands on his hips and a grin on his face, he announced to the grandstands, "It's done, Danasik-san." He directed his gaze toward his parents and the fedora-wearing fallen angel, who was looking at him with deep satisfaction, reveling in the attention of the other parents. Danasik returned Issei's announcement with a slow clap, complete with a smug, eyes-closed smirk that practically screamed, "I knew he'd impress you all." The fedora man then summoned a towel and a cold protein shake, which he expertly sent Issei's way. Issei caught them with a grateful nod and a refreshing sip of the protein shake. He found that even in the world of magic, some things were universal, like the satisfaction of a post-workout drink. As Issei reveled in the post-workout glow, a hushed murmur of excitement began to circulate among the crowd as the earth shook beneath their feet. All eyes turned to the epicenter of attention as a figure quite literally rose from the ground, along with an impromptu stage made of raised earth, staged before the grand stairs that would lead to a building Issei had no idea what it was for. This examiner was a man with dark green hair and an air of devilish nobility, his golden eyes almost perpetually squinted or half-closed, added to his enigmatic charm. His arrival alone had a profound effect on the female examinees. Hearts raced, swooning ensued, and a collective sigh seemed imminent, while the boys couldn't help but admire his reputation as a former student and now a professor at this prestigious arcane academy. As the crowd gawked at Diodora's dramatic display, Issei glanced at the examiner's theatrics and muttered under his breath with a genuine question, "Why's he showing off to us teens? Isn't he an adult?" For a brief moment, Diodora's charming smile faltered, revealing a hint of veiled irritation that he barely hid. Clearing his throat, the examiner moved on with the welcoming speech. "Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed parents, and, of course, our promising young talents," Diodora Astaroth began his speech with a flourish, his voice dripping with honeyed charm. "Today, as we stand on the threshold of a new academic year at our prestigious Arcane Academy, we are not merely embarking on a journey of magical education. No, my dear examinees, we are venturing forth into a realm of boundless potential, where the mysteries of the supernatural world shall be unveiled before your very eyes." His words flowed like a river of silver, mesmerizing the audience with his charisma. "In this hallowed institution, we shall nurture your talents, hone your skills, and guide you on a path towards greatness. Here, you shall learn the arcane arts, master the intricacies of magic, and discover the hidden depths of your supernatural abilities." Diodora's smile was positively radiant as he continued, "I have no doubt that each one of you possesses the potential for greatness, and it is my solemn duty as your professor to unlock that potential and help you shine like the brightest stars in the night sky. So, my dear students, I implore you to embrace the challenges that lie ahead with open hearts and open minds." He paused for dramatic effect, his gaze sweeping over the attentive crowd. "Today marks the beginning of a remarkable journey, one that will shape not only your future but the future of our supernatural world. I have faith in each and every one of you, and I eagerly anticipate the incredible feats you will achieve during your time here." The applause that followed his grandiloquent speech resembled a volcanic eruption, and the crowd's cheers could have easily drowned out a dragon's roar. As he concluded his elaborate oratory, his keen eyes landed squarely on Issei, whose expression seemed to declare, "No thoughts allowed, brain on vacation." Diodora's irritation swelled like an overinflated balloon. It intensified further as a nearby examinee couldn't resist the opportunity to tease Issei, who seemed to radiate a powerful idiot vibe with his vacant stare. With a sly grin, a black-haired woman in regal dress with black feathers leaned toward him with a mischievous look and asked, "Hey, do you even grasp the profundity of what the professor just delivered, Mr. Bumpkin?" Completely oblivious to being the subject of mockery, Issei offered a nonchalant shrug and replied in his usual straightforward manner, "Nah, not a clue what he's on about. But I didn't want to rain on the dude's parade, you know? He looks like he's been rehearsing this speech since the Middle Ages." "The dude?" Diodora caught the whole exchange, and with a subtle flicker of irritation in his eyes, he silently resolved to flunk Issei no matter what, determined to teach the young upstart a lesson in humility. But Issei was as humble as he could get, fully aware that he must be the least threatening examinee around. Yet his sincerity only seemed to baffle his fellow examinee further, who exchanged incredulous glances with those nearby. Feeling bold and eager to nab his first friend, and maybe a little too honest, Issei then added his genuine compliment. "By the way, you've got great racks, Mississippi." The woman he mistook as a succubus blinked her golden eyes twice. "I beg your pardon?" Huh. Maybe she didn't quite catch his words. "I said you've got great racks?" With a twitch, she shot him a glare that could melt glass, much to his confusion, before promptly turning away with a haughty huff. "Do not talk to me ever again." Issei wilted. Oh. Only later that Issei would learn that complimenting someone's breasts in reality would not work as well as it did in those Arrow comics. For now, he was stuck questioning if he should have praised her hips instead? Or maybe she was a vampire. In that case, maybe he should have praised her eyes or fangs or something. Well, and only soon that Issei would come to learn of this temptress name, and that she was not, for a fact, a succubus nor an elf. Because despite this Heritor possessed elven-like ears and a dangerous allure that could rival a succubus, Semiramis was anything but. With the grand opening speech concluded, Diodora proceeded to initiate the entrance exam. In an impressive display of magical prowess, he summoned a massive, intricate magic circle bearing the sigil of the Astaroth green family crest, green star surrounded by 5 crimson stars, beneath the feet of all the examinees. The ground quivered, and natural long tables with ornate carvings erupted from the ground's center. The test papers appeared if they descended from the heavens themselves, fluttered down gracefully, each paired with an exquisite writing quill. "Dear examinees," he declared, his tone dripping with poise, "these test papers, each letter pulsating with a life of its own, shall be your inaugural trial." The spectacle left the entire assembly in a state of awe, with admiration and fascination glinting in their eyes. However, Issei, perpetually the voice of bewildered reason and innate curiosity to always learn more of this unfamiliar world, couldn't resist muttering his perplexity aloud. Couldn't they have set this up from the get-go? He leaned over to a fellow examinee and asked with genuine bewilderment, "And why the open field? I was honestly expecting something more hands-on. You know, a good old-fashioned brawl. Maybe a tug-of-war with a hydra or something?" Issei's comment resonated and rippled, especially with those who favored a more hands-on approach. The assembly quickly divided into 2 distinct factions, the muscle-brained enthusiasts, who yearned for a physical challenge, and the magic snobs, who believed in the purity of intellectual aptitude. As the murmurs of agreement cascaded through the crowd, so did the ensuing bickering. "He's got a point, you know," muttered one burly examinee, his muscles bulging as if ready to take on the world. A dragonborn echoed his agreement. "I really thought we're going to fight each other, not words. I was ready to wrestle a minotaur or something, man, and I've polished my sword all night long." These voices were met by the chorus of disapproving retorts from the magically inclined. "I can't believe they'd entertain such barbaric notions," a particular elf stated. "Physical challenges are so last century, we're here for intellectual superiority." Her view was shared by a vampire, who undoubtedly directed her words at the werewolves pack. "This is an arcane academy, not a playground for mindless brutes." If this isn't a playground, then what's with the playground-level insult? The comments were not unmet with a scathing retort as a woman with ashen gray hair and pointy lupin ears bit back, seemingly the alpha of her group. "Hm? Karnstein?" The vampire tittered graciously, her crimson eyes flaring under the shade provided by her umbrella. "I'm well aware that your brother attends this academy, but don't expect you can always turn tail and hide behind his shadow, Lunagaru." As the age-old vampire and werewolves rivalry brewed into the new generation, other races were getting agitated as well. Even among the Dullahans, a division emerged. Those who embraced brute strength and those who valued intelligence and strategy clashed in a subtle but palpable way. The Dragonborns, typically associated with raw power, found themselves divided as well. Some nodded vigorously in agreement with Issei's sentiments, while others rolled their eyes at what they considered a lack of refinement. The power enthusiasts, colloquially known as muscle idiots by their more magically inclined peers, exchanged knowing glances, their expressions mirroring Issei's sentiments. This burgeoning conflict between physicality and magic began to cast a shadow over the once unified assembly. Observing this rift among the examinees, Diodora couldn't help but feel a growing sense of annoyance. He had been tasked and had meticulously crafted this examination to challenge both aspects of a supernatural's abilities, seeking a harmonious blend of magic and physical prowess. Now, thanks to a nobody's outspoken comment, the academy grounds seemed on the verge of erupting into a chaotic confrontation. "Silence! And let the exam commence," he declared with a hint of impatience though maintaining his composure, as Diodora conjured a regal seat made of earth, and took his place in the proceeding with a determinately sour mood. As Issei took his place at one of the makeshift tables, surrounded by his fellow examinees, he couldn't help but furrow his brow in perplexity. The test papers before him were a chaotic jumble of scrambled words that seemed to dance on the page like drunken spiders, defying all logic and comprehension. Then again, what did he know about magic? For all he knew, even gravity might be magic. He glanced around for inspiration. To his left, a student elegantly waved their wand, commanding the unruly letters to fall in line with a flourish. To his right, another one, adorned with scales and feathers, simply pointed their clawed finger, uttering an incantation that brought order to the chaos with ease. Meanwhile, a third student recited Ordo Verbis as if it were the most natural thing in the world, and the letters obediently complied. With a sigh of reluctant conformity, Issei retrieved his standard black wand with its distinctive white tip, a thoughtful gift from DanzyDanz. He mimicked the spell he'd overheard from the lips of his peers. Ordo Verbis, he uttered with hope. But in a twist that was hardly surprising, the letters remained stubbornly unimpressed, continuing their chaotic cha-cha as if they'd never even heard of Ordo Verbis. Ordo Verbis, he tried again, this time adopting the same tone as his mother when she saw him sneaking out at night time. Same result. Ordo Verbis? He tried again with a different intonation this time, as if he was asking the words for what sort of drinks they wanted. Still, there was no response. The letters mocked his efforts, twirling and somersaulting across the pages as if to say, "Tough luck, buddy." Growing more exasperated by the second, Issei muttered to himself, "This is stupid." As the scene unfolded, Issei's parents and DanzyDanz looked on, their expressions a cocktail of panic and second-guessing their decision to involve him in this magical world. Maybe this wasn't a great idea after all. Diadora, on the other hand, was thoroughly enjoying the spectacle of Issei's bewilderment. But then, in a fit of exasperation, Issei decided to think for a moment. Perhaps the examiner had laid a hidden hint like his mother's did back when she was teaching him basic math. What did the dude say again? Each letter pulsating with a life of its own? Maybe that was the clue. Then Issei took matters into his own hands. Quite literally. He jabbed his thumb down onto one of the unruly letters, treating it like it stole his prized magazine, pinning it down as he delivered a cold glare that could have frightened a gorgon into stone. Anything that lives, he growled with the kind of low menace that would make a basilisk think twice, can be killed. Much to Diadora's astonishment and ever-growing annoyance, the other letters, apparently scared out of their wits and horrified by this audacious move, promptly straightened themselves out, forming coherent words and sentences in a frantic effort to avoid any further thumb-induced mayhem. The once chaotic exam papers now lay neatly organized before Issei, as if they had never been in a state of wild rebellion. The surrounding magically inclined students gaped in astonishment, their wands dropping to their sides. "You can do that?" whispered a certain tomboyish Dullahan with blue hair and a green streak, before pressing her armored thumb down on the letters and giving the exam papers an equally icy glare, her voice a low contralto. "Hey, play nice or I'll play rough." Other aspiring powerhouse enthusiasts quickly copied their thumb techniques, and much to their amazement, it worked like a charm. Issei, oblivious to the spectacle and inspiration he had unwittingly provided, simply grinned at the miraculously unscrambled words and proceeded to present his papers. His parents exchanged wide-eyed glances, their expressions oscillating between astonishment and parental pride. DanzyDanz, on the other hand, could only shake his head in disbelief. It seemed that Issei's unique brand of non-magical chaos had somehow brought order to the magical chaos before him, and it was a sight to behold. With the first practical exams concluded, several students found themselves eliminated, their dreams of attending the renowned arcane academy of Belgazix dashed. Tears were shed, some more bitterly than others as they returned to their parents, some staying out of respect to their friends among the examinees, some leaving straight home to numb their sorrows. Diadora, with a demeanor as cold as a snow golem's heart, continued to lead the examination, making it clear that he had zero sympathy for those who couldn't keep up. As the entrance exams kicked off, Issei and the remaining examinees were faced with tasks that required a profound understanding of magic. However, Issei, the unapologetic maverick, approached them with his unique, muscle-bound perspective. His unorthodox methods and out-of-the-box thinking began to inspire a motley crew of power enthusiasts who couldn't resist the lure of his unconventional charm. "Kid, so that no one suspects your idiot strength, Make up a fake spell name or classification just before you show your strength. Danasek's words of caution resonated within him. When confronted with a riddle that required solving a complex magical equation, Issei did what any sane person would do, flexed his biceps, muttered muscle magic, kilo impact, and delivered a ground-shattering punch. The shockwave revealed the magical boxes containing the answers hidden beneath the field. The Dragonborns and other muscle aficionados nodded in silent appreciation, and soon they were all attempting to solve magical problems by enhancing their physical might instead of funneling their mana into their magical prowess. The second challenge involved summoning and controlling elemental spirits, a task that typically involved intricate hand movements and incantations. Issei, however, had a different approach. Muttering a baloney spell he'd prepared nights before, Issei exerted his physical strength to create a massive gust of wind, leaving onlookers convinced he had summoned a small tornado-like air elemental with a simple clap of his hands. It was like watching a magician pull a rabbit out of a dumbbell. Issei's unconventional antics spread like wildfire, and even the students who had initially scoffed at his methods found themselves drawn into the chaos. They realized that sometimes, thinking outside the magical box could lead to the most unexpected results. As they powered through the exams with their peculiar blend of brute force and magical mayhem, Issei and his newfound clique earned themselves the moniker of the Muscle Wizards. In the third challenge, examinees were tasked with navigating a complex labyrinth filled with magical traps and illusions, with strict airspace regulations in place. Anyone caught cheating by flying was in for a rude awakening as they smacked themselves into protective barriers like enchanted bugs. The walls themselves were embedded with protective barriers, rendering those who could phase through matters finding themselves smacking themselves into the hedge's concealed earthen wall. Never one to shy away from tackling his problems head-on, Issei decided to give the same treatment to the labyrinth, charging straight into the magically infused walls. He even allowed a small, innocent-looking girl, evidently exhausted from all the exams, to hitch a ride on his back as he passed her by. Though, the bumpy ride made her feel like she was on the back of a wild centaur rather than a human. Catching sight of his bulldozing approach, his fellow muscle wizards enthusiastically joined the fun, and the rest followed suit, creating a labyrinth of chaos as they punched, kicked, and shoulder-barged their way through, freaking out their less muscled peers, who, despite their grumbling, crawled out of the labyrinth thanks to the many alternative exits that was now formed. "Thank you." The blonde girl shyly nodded her head as she climbed down from his back, her long ears turning a shade redder as she nervously twirled her smooth locks. "Hey, don't mention it," Issei replied with a grin and his trademark thumbs up. "Why did you help me?" "Well, my mom always told me it's good to help animals," Issei explained in his typically blunt manner. Realizing his words might come across as rude, he quickly added, "Not that you're an animal, but you kinda reminded me of one, like a small, cute one." He mumbled, trying to clarify his intent. "Adorable ones. Like a fluffy golden rabbit?" "Ooh." She nodded, her blush deepening, mistaking his comment as flirting due to her heritage. "I'm Asia Argento." "Hiyo to Issei," he said, offering a handshake. "Call me Issei." "Issei?" The young girl in the green outfit that Issei thought was too stuffy for this sort of adventure muttered. She shook his hand shyly, a fleeting gesture. She'd no idea the softness of her touch had left him mystified. Her hand was so small. Or maybe it was his hands that were bigger. "Thank you, Mr. Issei. I hope one day I can return the favor." "No worries." He flashed a grin, before remembering his parents' guidance. "Oh, actually, I don't need favor or anything. But will you be my friend?" Radiant green eyes widening, Asia squeaked, blood quickly rushing back to her face and ears. "Huh? Is that a no?" Asia glanced around, feeling a mix of surprise and delight as she looked at Issei's earnest expression. After a moment of hesitation, she nodded bashfully and said, "Okay, misters. It's a pleasure." "Awesome, my first friend. An elf?" Asia blinked and looked slightly guilty. "But I'm not an elf." "Huh." Issei blinked. "So what are you then?" "Succubus?" Asia admitted, her own struggle with her innate desires beginning to show. "You're a what? It was nice talking to you, Mr. Issei. Please excuse me." The succubus in the green outfit quickly scampered off the moment she saw her peers. A collective headpat party awaited her. She seemed to have unwittingly become the designated little sister of the group, much to her embarrassment, leaving behind a very baffled Issei. "What? Seriously? Since when did succubus wear a nun getup?" Diodora, on the other hand, watched in exasperation as his carefully designed magical tests were obliterated by sheer muscle and determination. His irritation grew with each unconventional success, and he was rapidly approaching the limits of his patience. Issei's influence had unleashed a magical maelstrom that he couldn't control, and it was pushing him to the edge of frustration. But for Issei and his fellow power wizards, it was a day of triumph and camaraderie. They had not only survived the magical exams but had also proved that sometimes a little muscle could go a long way in the world of magic. Issei found himself joining in the triumphant yelling and cheering and fist-pumping without not really having a clue what was going on, simply happy to be there for the good vibes, his face a permanent, laughing face. Of course, not everyone was thrilled with the muscle wizard revolution, particularly those who had spent years honing their intellect and magical finesse, and those who relied more on their skills and quick wit to adapt on the go. The clash between brains and brawn was brewing, and it promised to be a showdown of epic proportions. One particularly brawny dragonborn flexed his muscles and declared, "Who needs spells when you can enhance your pure, unadulterated strength?" The technical students, with their precision and magical finesse, scoffed at the muscle wizards. A white-eared kitsune remarked as she sniffled her nose, "Strength is impressive, but it's no match for the elegance of a perfectly executed maneuver. It takes finesse and precision to master." What's a fox to a dragon? "My mother has banished your kin countless times," another from the yokai clans addressed him. "Don't be shocked when that happens to you in the future." "Oh," the dragonborn raised his eyebrows at the still-growing Kyubi. "Is that a challenge, Lady Kunu?" Kunu flippantly averted her gaze. "Merely a word of caution." Meanwhile, the skilled magician students, who had spent years mastering the intricacies of magic, exchanged knowing glances. A studious elf with a tome of spells nodded, her lustrous blonde hair swaying as she said, "Let them have their fun. True magic requires more than just muscle, it requires knowledge, discipline, and finesse." Issei and Asia, caught in the middle of the ongoing verbal crossfire, stood there with a confused but nonetheless neutral expression, whereas Asia was getting bothered by all the animosity. Issei, however, was nearly drooling as he wondered how the heck did that busted Nikomata keep her chest from spilling off her loose kimono. He had no desire to make enemies on his first day at the academy, something his parents and Donasik had encouraged him in advance. They whispered words of wisdom in his ear, "Make friends, not enemies, Issei. You catch more flies with honey than with a wrestling move." One particularly passionate devil with impressive horns argued, "Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And everyone has a move until they're magically restrained. Or tripped." A twin-tailed Nikomata could be spotted clutching her large feline white ears, evidently annoyed, "So noisy." Then the ground trembled beneath their feet as the maze entrenched itself, much to Diodora's growing frustration. The chaotic magical exams had finally reached their conclusion, and Diodora Astaroth, his patience thoroughly tested and his demeanor stretched to its limits, took center stage once more. He cleared his throat, the irritation still evident in his voice as he addressed the remaining examinees. "Ladies and refined gentlemen," he began, his golden eyes glaring at the muscle wizard and the other students who had embraced their unconventional methods. "It appears that you have all displayed a unique approach to our magical challenges today," Diodora began, his words dripping with a blend of exasperation and thinly veiled amusement. "For better or worse, you have demonstrated a certain unorthodox talent." As he announced the final stage of the examination, the tension in the arena lingered in the air. The division among the students, whether they were power enthusiasts, technical experts, or skilled magicians, was now glaringly apparent, even among this select group of 50 or so individuals. Now, for the final stage of our examination, it's time for a duel. However, let me make one thing clear. Regardless of the outcome, the decision to enroll at Arcane Academy of Belgazix lies within your capabilities alone. We accept only the best of the best, and this is your final judgment. With those words, an arena erupted from the ground, an impressive spectacle that left the examinees in awe. But it wasn't just the arena that drew their attention, it was the sudden appearance of an army of nurses, one being Rainier, who had easily slipped into the academy using her connections, shooting a wink at the brunette, who, much to her annoyance, was a bit preoccupied checking out the other nurses. Rainier was sexy all right, but she was competing with succubi. Complete with their alluring, skin-tight nurse attire that had undoubtedly become the focus of Issei's fascination and several students. His parents couldn't help but sigh at his never-ending antics, shaking their heads, with Mickey Hayadu tugging Gore's cheek for paying too much attention to the medical team. Diodora continued, his voice commanding the attention of the assembled examinees. In this duel, you will face off against one another to demonstrate your combat prowess, strategic brilliance, and magical aptitude. Remember, this is not just a duel or a spar, this is your chance to prove your worth to Belgazix. Victory or defeat, if you don't give it your all, then I suggest you leave this place. As the examinees exchanged determined glances, a spark of competitive fire flickering in their eyes, the stage was indeed set for the ultimate showdown. It was more than a battle for enrollment at the Arcane Academy of Belgazix. It was a clash of egos, a symphony of spells, and a tango of talents about to unfurl. Among them stood Issei, his anticipation evident in his grin as he eagerly anticipated the chance to test his worth. Time to see if those early days of wrestling owlbears and bench-pressing yeti cubs would hold him in good stead. With a sly grin, Diodora scattered tiny papers into the air with a flourish of his hand. The audience watched in rapt attention as the pieces of parchment danced above, carried by a gentle breeze. "Let's see who our first contestants will be," Diodora announced, his voice dripping with false anticipation. He pinpointed one of the floating papers with a flick of his fingers, and with a burst of blue flames, Issei's name was forged in fiery letters above the arena, creating a spectacular display of magic. "Hayadu Issei." The crowd erupted into cheers and applause, while Issei blinked in surprise, not expecting to be chosen first. He looked up at the flaming letters with a mix of awe and confusion. "Can't you just draw out an actual lottery? This is kinda sketchy. Gee, good luck, Mr. Issei." He struck a grin and jutted his thumbs up, a gesture of approval from his father that stuck. "Thanks. You too." Bewildered, Asia tilted her head. "Me too?" Nonetheless, Issei marched into the arena, cheered on by his parents as well as his unlikely crew of muscle wizards, including those that had been eliminated. They had stayed strictly from newly formed camaraderie forged by appreciation to muscles. And, not wanting to lose to these muscle brains, those who believed in technical prowess, magical aptitude and support, all stayed behind, forming a particularly larger and heated audience compared to last year's entrance exam. And for his opponent? Diodora ignored his comment. Determined to make the boy the first to fall and to humiliate the country bumpkin, he pretended to scan the remaining floating papers. With another flick of his hand, he selected a name seemingly at random. The paper bearing a certain name shot up into the sky, its edges glowing with an eerie, greenish light as the name combusted. "Time it." The crowd fell silent as they beheld the formidable opponent, Raffled, to face Issei. Exuding an air of chilling confidence that matched her stunning appearance, Tiamat strutted towards the arena. With hands crossed under her ample bosom, she appeared as a beautiful woman with straight, long and ethereal pale blue hair that cascaded down her back like a waterfall of frozen moonlight. Her dark blue eyes were sharp and penetrating, radiating an aura of otherworldly wisdom and power. Her complexion was porcelain pale, accentuating the cool, almost aloof beauty that made her the envy of many. She was dressed in a fashionably rebellious ensemble, wearing navy blue ripped slim-fitting jeans that accentuated her lithe figure and a fitting top that showcased her elegant curves and power. Her very essence radiated with the might of her draconic heritage, and she was a sight to behold in her regal and formidable beauty. Enchanting and intimidating, a testament to her formidable nature as a chaos karma dragon. He scratched the back of his head, clearly out of his comfort zone in the presence of such a stunning opponent as Tiamat. Not because he had an idea of who the heck she was. He just didn't want to hit a girl. He doubted getting violent could score him his first harem member. Maybe he could tire her out or something, wait, but then that'd be rude to her. He didn't want to be rude. Whenever you're ready, Diodora permitted. Well, Tiamat regarded him with a cheeky grin. Any last words? The chuckles and snickers from his peers did not help his confidence. Issei felt like he'd accidentally shown up to a formal gala wearing a neon tracksuit, and the crowd's reaction seemed to affirm that sentiment. He paused and crossed his arms in contemplation, much to the enjoyment of Diodora, who believed he was starting to show his doubts. But no, Issei was only figuring out that wearing his tracksuit in this magical battleground was akin to bringing a surfboard to a tea party. It just didn't fit. His mother's voice echoed in his mind, urging him to be a well-mannered young man. A moment please? Tiamat narrowed her eyes as her opponent seemed to have decided it was time for a quick costume change. He began to peel off the loose-fitting tracksuit, folding it neatly and placing it aside. His mother, watching from the stands, couldn't help but feel touched by her son's display of manners, even though his penchant for anything erotic was a constant source of mild annoyance. At least he knew when to be polite. As Issei unveiled his new attire, the audience couldn't help but gasp. Clad in a form-fitting black shirt that clung to him like a second skin, it became abundantly clear that Issei was much more than met the eye. His muscles and veins seemed to pop out in stark relief. Issei stretched, his body flexing and rippling with power, the very air around him quivering with anticipation. Diodora's reminder to take the duel seriously had not gone unheeded. He didn't just adopt a fighting stance. He embodied it, his muscles pulsating with the promise of sheer force. And then he whispered calmly under his breath. Heavenly restriction release. Ascension. Fierce white mist surged from his body, as if his very essence had transformed into an electrifying surge of power. The yokai in the audience, along with some surprised devils, initially recognized it as Tuki, manifestation of one's life force, an external manifestation of their ki. A technique believed to be unique to yokai and one peculiar devil, who was now watching from the grandstands with a mixture of curiosity. Why did he rename it? Was it just a similar technique, or had he somehow elevated and modified the Tuki technique into something entirely new? Of course, it was something he made up. Nevertheless, here it was astonishingly emanating from a human. All right, Issei declared, his brown hair standing on end as if charged by the raw strength coursing through him. Let's ball, icy woman. Tiamat's shocked expression quickly transformed into a sly grin. It seemed that the oddball had piqued her interest. The prospect of enrolling in this academy, as Tannen had suggested, suddenly seemed much more entertaining and promising to her. Well, that old coot was nothing if not sagacious. The Dragon Kings indeed possessed distinctive strengths and weaknesses. Tannen, in his various incarnations, embodied wisdom and pacifism, traits that had served him well throughout the ages. Yulong was marked by his quick thinking and calculated cowardice, a unique blend that made him a formidable figure in his own right. Vritra, on the other hand, exuded bravery alongside an apathetic demeanor to anything that didn't relate to him, a combination that defined his complex character. Fafnir's personality was a mix of loyalty and an insatiable greed for treasures, making him a dragon of unwavering devotion and undeniable avarice. As for Midgardsormr, brilliance and laziness were the hallmarks of his existence, a paradoxical combination that shaped his approach to life and challenges. As for Tiamat, well, she was often regarded as the carefree brute compared to the other dragon kings, current or former. Shape-shifting into a full-fledged dragon was prohibited within the academy grounds, but partial dragonification was allowed. Still, she didn't expect she'd have to use it this soon, especially against a human without a shred of magic. Perhaps he was a hurrieder? Well, no matter. As azure scales started to cover her feet, her cumant hands morphed into sharp, crystalline claws made of pure ice. Ichor black veins threaded their way through the icy appendages, highlighting the deadly beauty of her new form. The scales wrapped tightly around her neck, forming a regal collar that symbolized her dominion over the elements. 2 magnificent horns sprouted from the back of her ears, spiraling gracefully forward and curved like a crown. The horns glistened with a dark, enchanting allure, a stark contrast to her previous appearance. Perhaps the most mesmerizing change was her eyes. The once human pupils were now submerged in a sea of black sclera, their eerie and chilling blue irises standing out like frozen sapphires glimmering in abyss. "Very well, boy," she smiled as her eyes narrowed. "Entertain me." Issei, still somewhat baffled by the abrupt shift, responded, "What does that mean? Are you asking me to tap dance? Fight me, you fool." "Oh, okay." With a resounding boom, shockwaves rippled as Issei vanished from his original spot. Tiamat's eyes widened as she registered the sight of a curled fist was on a collision course with her face, trailing a comet's tail of blazing energy. The impact of Issei's fist colliding with Tiamat's scaled jaw unleashed a cataclysmic shockwave, sending her hurtling through the air like a shooting star. She smashed against the invisible walls of the arena, crashing against the protective barrier with a thunderous explosion of arcane energy as dust and smoke combusted from the crash. Goru and Mickey exchanged bewildered glances, their faces mirroring a mix of shock and disbelief. "Our son just punched a dragon. I don't even know how to process this. Did he just send the Chaos Karma dragon flying with a punch?" Donasek, Rainier, Diodora and the rest of the audience were equally flabbergasted, their jaws hanging low as they witnessed the astonishing scene unfold before them. Dust and debris filled the air as the audience watched in stunned silence, their eyes fixated on the battlefield. For a moment, it seemed as if the battle had reached its climax, but they were sorely mistaken. From the billowing smoke and debris, Tiamat emerged unscathed, her imposing figure now surrounded by an azure air that crackled visibly, blazing with newfound intensity. A small trail of blood graced her lips, hinting at the resilience beneath her formidable exterior. Her red-hot tongue licked a trail of blood on her lips. Her once regal outfit had been completely torn asunder by the explosive impact, revealing a sleek, form-fitting black sleeveless shirt beneath. It was made from the finest and most resilient silk, harvested from the elusive moonlit Actius, moth yokai that could only be found in the deepest, most treacherous parts of the yokai realm. A custom set of clothing enchanted with powerful magic, because her shirts kept getting shredded whenever she felt particularly adventurous. Read, picking fights like picking berries. And now, the undeniable strength in her athletic body and toned arms was now on full display, clad in her mystical thin layer of blue haze. "You're not too shabby, kid," Tiamat spoke with a hint of admiration, her voice carrying a certain weight as they left her smirking lips. Still standing on the same spot, glowing like a human torch, Issei snapped his fingers. "Aw man, I thought that'd at least knock you out." "Ha, don't underestimate me," she retorted, her draconic aura flaring to life. "I was just starting to like you." "Really?" Issei beamed. "Will you be my girlfriend?" The audience erupted in hushed murmurs at the audacious proposition, but Tiamat's smirk held a hint of genuine amusement. She could tell he wasn't mocking her. After all, honorable dragons had a knack for detecting falsehoods as precisely as sharks sense blood. Satisfied with their banter, Tiamat blazed towards Issei like a comet, her massive wings propelling her with the force of a tempest, leaving a trail of azure flames in her wake. Issei stood his ground, his resolve unyielding as his eyes shifted from negligent to one of intense focus as they locked onto her. Their clash resumed with vengeance, the very foundations of the arena groaning under the overwhelming force of their titanic blows. Issei's reflexes transcended human limitations, his movements a blur as he deftly evaded Tiamat's razor-sharp claws and powerful tail with uncanny precision. But Tiamat, a seasoned warrior in her own right, proved to be just as agile and formidable. As a test, she sent out dagger-like icicles, but the blazing white ki that surrounded him melted them away, evaporating them into steam before they could even touch him. Tiamat watched in surprise and exhilaration as her attacks were effortlessly nullified, and decided to increase her fervor. Ducking beneath a ferocious roundhouse kick, Tiamat swiftly dropped to her knees and executed a sweeping leg motion, knocking Issei off balance. Oh? She then channeled energy into her palms and unleashed a concentrated blast directly at his chest. The force of the impact sent Issei flying through the air, creating a storm of dust and smoke in his wake as he crashed against the barrier. "Ah crap," she muttered, her aura dying off as she might have gotten ahead of herself. That draconic shot would have pulverized anyone below dragon threat level. As the magical dust and smoke cleared, her eyes widened as Issei emerged unscathed. His black shirt remained intact, a testament to the absurd intensity of his fighting spirit that had absorbed the devastating blow. "All right," he muttered, his frenzied grin revealing his excitement. "You're not half bad yourself, lady." It had been a long while since he had faced such a formidable opponent, and he relished every moment of this exhilarating battle. Issei had battled countless monsters and ventured through dungeons in the nameless forest when he felt bored, but this was on a whole different level. As the audience gasped at his reappearance, his parents and Donasek practically sweating bullets, for the first time in ages, Tiamat felt the exhilaration of a true battle. She'd thought during her demise against Fenrir, she'd never feel this sort of thrill, the thrill of facing an opponent who could match her might. It was a fight she had longed for, and now, with Issei, perhaps she had found someone that could finally raise her bar. Issei surged forth with a manic grin, and Tiamat blazed forward to meet him, her azure aura flaring like a raging snowstorm. Her crystalline claws gleamed in the arena's magical light as she launched a series of rapid strikes, each aimed with deadly accuracy. Issei's agile form weaved and dodged, deftly avoiding her attacks, albeit narrowly. The earthly arena was further being torn apart by their intense clashes. Each punch sent shockwaves rippling through the ground, creating craters and fractures that marred the once pristine battlefield. Debris and rubble filled the air, creating a chaotic storm of destruction. At one point, Tiamat's fist came crashing down with the force of a falling meteor against his, and the impact shattered one of the scales covering her fist, sending a spray of crystalline shards in all directions. Tiamat's azure blood dripped from her injured hand, and she couldn't help but smile. "Finally, a worthy opponent," she muttered, her voice tinged with satisfaction. In response, she quickly began to rebuild the damaged scales, making them even denser and more formidable. Then she took flight, her powerful draconic wings carrying her high into the air with a single beat that left a whirlwind in their wake. She prepared to unleash her fearsome chaos breath attack, a deadly combination of fire, ice, and chaotic energy that had struck terror into the hearts of many. The very air around her crackled with elemental power, vibrating uncontrollably. But as she turned to face him, much to her shock, Issei was right in front of her, his blazing fighting spirit propelling him upwards with incredible speed. He had sparred against monsters with ranged attacks in the nameless forest, a secret he had never shared with his parents to spare them worry. His eccentric upbringing as a hermit had taught him that the key to fighting ranged attackers was to never let them gain distance in the first place. Issei closed the gap between them with blinding speed, his fists glowing as he aimed a punch at Tiamat's jaw. Forced to cancel her attack, the Dragon King reacted with lightning-fast reflexes, twisting her body to avoid the full force of the blow. Issei's fist grazed her scaled cheek, leaving a trail of sparks in its wake. Tiamat retaliated with a swipe of her claws, but Issei propelled himself away by using her arm. However, as he attempted to regain his bearings in midair, he had a sudden realization that sent a jolt of panic through him, the dawning realization that he, for a fact, couldn't fly. "Oh crud," and so he muttered as the arena floor was approaching rapidly. Tiamat watched his descent with a bemused expression, her draconic wings allowing her to remain airborne effortlessly. She had expected him to be a challenging opponent, but she certainly didn't anticipate he couldn't fly. Perhaps this battle wouldn't be as thrilling as she had initially hoped. Just as Issei was about to crash into the arena's floor, he managed to twist his body in midair, landing in a crouched position. He left a small crater in the ground, but he had avoided serious injury. He glanced up at Tiamat with a sheepish grin, dusting off his hands as if the fall had been nothing more than a minor inconvenience. "Hey pretty lady. Can you, go down here?" he asked, the nonchalant tone in his voice drawing a chuckle from the Dragon King. "Well, only because you asked nicely," Tiamat remarked, her azure aura blazing with renewed excitement. She descended to the ground, ready to resume their battle on equal footing. The clash of titans raged on, each clash of their fists sending shockwaves through the arena. Issei continued to employ his muscle magic from time to time as he threw a wild haymaker in unpredictable bursts or when his fists became a blur of motion, striking with precision and power. Narrowly avoiding a jab, Issei felt a nick on his cheek as blood began to trickle out from the thin wound. "Killer move, God's hand." His right fist exploded with searing white ki, and without a mighty battle cry, being a silent fighter who believed actions spoke louder than his words could ever be, Issei unleashed a punch straight to her abs. "Keith." Tiamat winced as the full force of the blow struck her. She could have instinctively formed protective scales to shield her stomach, but in that moment, she chose to endure it, wanting to witness the true extent of Issei's strength. And it proved to be more than sufficient, causing her to cough up a spatter of blood. The impact propelled Tiamat backward, sending her tumbling violently across the dirt field until she dug her razor-sharp claws deep into the ground, finally coming to a stop. The audacity of his power had left its unmistakable mark, and Tiamat couldn't have been more thrilled. Quickly rising to her feet, her chest heaving with exhilaration, a grin ever present on her lips, Tiamat decided to give him one last test. The scales covering her jaw gleamed ominously as the air crackled. An intense concentration of mana gathered before her open mouth, swirling like a maelstrom. A signature attack that had earned her the moniker of Chaos Karma Dragon, one that could rewrite the course of this battle. No way. Is she insane? Can the barrier even keep up? My mind's telling me to run, but my brain is telling me I wouldn't want to miss this show. We're all gonna die. Sensing the mounting danger as echoed by the panicking watchers, Issei knew he had to act swiftly. The key against ultimate attacks, something he made up, was to not allow ultimate attacks. Thus, he charged straight at her, white ki cloaking his entire body, his dash causing a crater in his wake. His muscles tensed, ready to deliver another powerful blow. The audience watched with bated breath as the clash of forces seemed inevitable, and the very ground beneath them trembled with tension. And then, everything went white. Enough. Diodora's dramatic flair stole the show as he waved his wand, shooting a brilliant firework into the sky that caught both combatants' attention. Issei's fist hung mere inches from her face, the force of his punch sending a fierce gust of wind roaring behind her. Tiamat's sky-blue hair fluttered dramatically as she snapped her mouth shut, dispersing the miniature black hole-like energy. Her smile was as radiant as the sky itself, despite her rapidly healing facial wounds. Meanwhile, Issei's expression had shifted from intense focus to outright frustration in the blink of an eye. "Both of you have proven your mettle," Diodora stated, his tone oozing reluctant approval. "There's no need to take this any further. Congratulations, Hayato Issei and Tiamat, you have passed." The battle had dragged on for far longer than Diodora had expected, and he had watched with a mixture of bemusement and irritation. He knew he couldn't let it continue indefinitely, he wanted to get back to his things for one, and his initial plan to humiliate Issei was no longer tenable. If that wasn't bad enough, now he couldn't even flunk this ridiculously powerful bumpkin. It'd risk raising questions about why Issei had failed the entrance exam, especially with representatives from other arcane academies present among the audience. Talent scouts eager to get their hands on these potential stars. The announcement prompted a mixture of surprise and relief from the audience, who had been on the edge of their seats throughout the intense battle as a thunderous ovation rang throughout the field of Balgazics. Issei couldn't contain his frustration. "Hey, what gives? We were just getting heated up." Tiamat, still eyeing him with her permanent satisfied smirk, slowly glanced over as thunderous applause erupted among the examinees and spectators, with the muscle wizards being the loudest, taking pride that their leading member managed to seal a draw against a Dragon King. It seemed that their opening act had only bolstered the spirits of the other examinees, each of them waiting for their turn with bated breath. Issei Hayuduha? Tiamat mused, her tone carrying a hint of admiration as she regarded the boy before him. I'll remember your name. Feeling emboldened by her acknowledgement, Issei nodded determinedly. Tiamat-san. And he decided to throw one last jab to test the waters with a mischievous grin. So, about becoming my girlfriend? She offered him a smirk as her icy blue stares bore down on him, being slightly taller than him. Get even stronger than me, boy. Then maybe I'll consider it. Tiamat's lingering chuckle hung in the air like a whispered challenge as she stretched her sculpted arms and sauntered away. Issei was left to ponder his newly discovered fascination, namely his unlocked fetish to athletic girls. He couldn't help but admit there was something undeniably alluring about a woman who could handle herself in a brawl and rocked a toned physique. Perhaps it was high time he added athletic to his ever-evolving list of ideal girl qualities. But with the duel concluded, even though he felt a twinge of disappointment at not securing a victory, Issei realized the harsh truth. He had to get a whole lot stronger, especially since he didn't have the luxury of using actual magic. He must be ridiculously weak compared to the other students, considering he couldn't even manage to inflict significant damage on Tiamat. However, instead of succumbing to despair, he felt a fiery determination welling up within him, a fierce desire to prove himself among his magically gifted peers. He knew he had to double his workout efforts to ensure he wouldn't lag behind the other students. After all, he couldn't rely on magic like they could, so his muscles were simply going to make up for his lack of magical arsenal. As he stood there, sweat and muck glistening his rugged look, pondering his future training regimen, blissfully unaware of the begrudging acknowledgement from some examinees and ex-examinees that he had no idea disliked him enough to want him to fail, a realization suddenly struck him like a lightning bolt. He had passed the entrance exam. With a burst of excitement, he couldn't contain himself any longer and dashed toward the grandstands where his parents and Danzydanz were sitting. "Mumsy, Pops, I made it," he yelled, his voice brimming with exuberance. His parents, who had been holding their breath throughout the intense duel, burst into tears of relief. Even Danzydanz, normally composed, had to discreetly wipe off the sweat he didn't even realize he had produced. Meanwhile, Rainier, still dressed in her nurse outfit, found herself wiping away sweat she didn't even realize she had produced. Although his face might not have set the world on fire, her thirst for his physique remained undeniable. The way his muscles contracted and flexed, just imagining herself laying atop his broad back had instilled thoughts in her head that no doubt had resonated with the succubi nurses. These life leeches would no doubt worship him like a god in bed, doubly so since he was no doubt a virgin, more fresh and untainted. Yet, his mentality was still too much of a kid for her to consider anything beyond admiration. But once he passed that maturity, well, let's just say Rainier wasn't the type to sit around and wait to be approached. And so, with a new set of stage, Diodora masked his annoyance as the exam went on. He couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. At least he wouldn't have to deal with the eccentric kid any longer, and remained blissfully unaware that because of his match setup, he had unleashed a deadly burning desire in the boy that didn't recognize his own strength. Issei's journey at the Arcane Academy of Ruelgazix was just beginning, and it promised to be an adventure like no other. After the electrifying clash between Issei and Tiamat, an opening act that earned a standing ovation for its chaotic brilliance, the entrance exam charged ahead with a series of duels that could only be described as a magical mosh pit. Spells crackled through the air, and various weapons pirouetted with more precision than an over-enthusiastic ballerina, each battle showcasing unique abilities and talents. The audience couldn't decide whether to be impressed or start a betting pool on who would accidentally turn themselves into a frog first. But the real show wasn't happening in the front lines of magical mayhem. It was happening behind the scenes, or more accurately, on the grassy sidelines. There, amidst the backdrop of fierce battles, instead of basking in his hard-fought draw and taking a well-deserved breather, he had chosen to engage in another peculiar endeavor, much to the confusion of his fellow examinees. "You're exercising?" one of the muscle wizards asked incredulously. "Instead of celebrating your entrance, you're working out?" currently sidestepping so rapidly that the grass beneath him seemed to smoke and causing afterimages that left onlookers both impressed and dizzy. Issei paused to reply with an unshakable grin. Yeah, gotta prep for that inevitable rematch with Tiamat. His words, and his peculiar humility, inspired the muscle wizards. Suddenly, they all joined in to partake in the workout fiesta before their duels. But let's be clear, none could match Issei's intensity or the borderline insanity of his training routine. These muscle-bound mages of extraordinary strength began to warm up and exercise, their efforts aimed at emulating Issei's intensity and insanity, though with mixed results. Races erupted among them, with centaur examinees engaging in sprint-offs, while the minotaurs opted for weightlifting contests, using massive boulders they summoned from the earth itself. There was a centaur who challenged Issei to a good old-fashioned sprint race, her hooves pounding the ground like thunder. Unfortunately for her, Issei sprinted so fast that he practically teleported from one spot to another, leaving the centaur in the dust with a flabbergasted expression. Not to be outdone, a Dullahan decided to challenge the very concept of arm wrestling itself by taking on a particularly sturdy tree. After all, if you can best nature, you can surely best anyone in the arena, right? But another Dullahan had a different idea. She chose to challenge the boy who had just drawn with a dragonborn. The result? Zenobia felt her arm nearly come off and she had found herself staring at the skies before she could even blink. If she were a living suit of armor, it might as well have been ripped from its hinges. But her loss only fueled her determination to become stronger, to one day be able to stand toe-to-toe against this freak of nature. And that was how Issei unknowingly gained a new rival that day, remaining oblivious to the fact that a girl resided within that suit of armor, thanks to Zenovia's boyish voice. Among the spectators who couldn't resist the charm of the burly muscle wizards and their impressive displays of strength were some succubi. Gifted naturally in support and disabler roles, two highly sought-after positions in the raiding game, the succubi practically secured their entrance exam the moment they reached the duel stage. Mere formalities. One of them was Asia Argento, a sweet and shy succubus with a pure heart unlike her innate intentions. Her fellow succubi peers couldn't resist teasing her mercilessly about her undeniable crush on a certain power idiot, which only made her blush and stammer more. As she watched Issei perform his jaw-dropping feats of athleticism, Asia Argento felt her heart race. She was torn between her overwhelming desire to approach him and her crippling shyness, which was currently having its own duel against her courage. Her succubi friends, ever the mischievous instigators, nudged her relentlessly, giggling and whispering encouragement. Come on, Asia, you know you want it. Just say hi. If you don't take him, then I'll gobble him up in a wink. Asia muttered, her tiny bat wings nervously fluttering like a flock of startled birds. She nonetheless took a deep breath, gathering her courage, which was hiding somewhere behind her spine. With a tentative approach, she finally summoned the strength to speak. Her voice was barely above a whisper as she greeted him, Hi, Mr. Issei. Pausing his serious series of squats to obliterate the universe, Issei turned to see the shy and adorable succubus standing before him. Her cheeks were so red that they could rival the most vibrant roses in the garden of embarrassment. Hey again, Asia-chan. He greeted her with a friendly nod and a cheerful grin. Hello. Asia nodded back, her heart doing a drum roll solo. Why, you were amazing, Sir Issei. I never thought I'd see a student that can match someone like Lady Tiamat. Ah, thanks. Issei chuckled heartily, scratching the back of his head. He really didn't think it was a big deal, especially since he didn't manage to KO her. She nodded again. Nodding was her go-to response. Asia's nerves didn't seem to be going anywhere, as her body swayed nervously, causing her blonde bangs peeking out her sister veil to sway and her green nun outfit to rustle. What kind of self-enchantment magic do you use, Mr. Issei? Issei blinked for a moment, caught off guard by the question. He started sweating even more, and it wasn't just from the post-workout glow. Cold, nervous sweat mixed in with the determination that he was going to sound convincing. It's muscle magic? He said with a straight face, as if that was the most natural thing in the world. Asia's head tilted slightly, her curiosity now fully engaged. Muscle magic? She repeated, blinking her big, innocent green eyes. I've never heard of that particular school of magic before. Issei was committed to the bit now, just like he practiced with DanzyDanz. Oh, it's a super exclusive and incredibly secret school of magic, he explained with a conspiratorial whisper. Only a few know about it. It's all about using the power of your biceps, abs, and glutes to perform incredible feats, Asia-chan. Asia blinked, clearly fascinated by this newfound knowledge. Wow, that sounds amazing, Mr. Issei. How long have you practiced? Since I got out of my crib. Probably when I was 8, I think. Well, that young? But I guess that's why you're so. Her gaze drifted downward to his sweat-soaked black shirt, emphasizing his well-defined muscles. She swallowed nervously. The nearby succubi, who had been watching this exchange with sheer delight, couldn't help but overwork their floating fans to combat the feverish heat rising within. Their hearts were aflutter as if they'd stumbled upon the very hero of an intensely steamy romance novel. To these sultry sirens, Issei was akin to a living, breathing romance novel cover model. His status as a pure-hearted virgin with paltry perversion only added to his allure, and the prospect of being the ones to harvest his hidden desires was like an irresistible siren's call. The pheromones wafting from his post-workout sweat didn't make matters any easier, practically turning the scene into a tantalizing tableau of temptation. If it weren't for Asia's presence, they might have succumbed to their desires and turned this peculiar conversation into a full-blown romance novel plotline, complete with swooning and passionate embraces. But as the dust settled from the previous battles, the army of nurses sprang into action, tending to the injured and the victorious alike. Meanwhile, the audience leaned forward in anticipation of the next duel. Now back to his composed self, Diodora did his best to ignore the rowdy muscle wizard's grunting and groaning in the background. He knew their workout was technically a pre-battle warm-up, but their enthusiasm was borderline overwhelming. So, with a flourish, he ignored those flareless brutes and announced the next duel. Ladies and gentlemen, our next match promises to be an exhilarating display of skill and strength. Allow me to introduce the contenders. Zenobia Corda and Luna Geru, step into the arena. Zenobia stood tall, her features concealed beneath a gleaming silver helmet. She was clad in an imposing set of Celtic plate armor that shimmered brilliantly in the sunlight. The polished surface of her armor caught the light, creating a dazzling spectacle. Two fur-trimmed spalders added a touch of extravagance to her otherwise straightforward attire. In her grip, she held Durandal, a sword of unmatched power, its stark blue blade emitting an ethereal glow. Intricate golden embellishments adorned its edges. Facing her was Luna Geru, the fearsome little sister of Lu Geru seeking to step out from her brother's shadows. Her fierce golden eyes reflected a primal glimmer, and her deadly talons of a predator extended menacingly from her fingertips, ready to shred steel. In contrast to Zenovia's heavily armored form, Luna was practically armorless. Her ashen gray hair flowed like a waterfall of silvered smoke, framing her striking features. Two wolf ears perched on top of her head twitched with anticipation, and her ashen tail, complete with a tuft of black fur at the tip, swayed rhythmically behind her. She sported a sleeveless jacket coat with fur around the lapels, which billowed slightly in the breeze. Beneath it, a simple gray tank top accentuated her tanned and well-toned physique. Her defined abs cast playful shadows as they flexed with each breath. She completed her attire with combat-ready shorts designed for agility and a pair of sturdy combat boots, indicating her readiness to use her legs as formidable weapons. With her fierce golden eyes and the primal aura she exuded, the Geru clan werewolf embodied a potent blend of strength and wilderness, a force of nature prepared to clash with the disciplined might of Zenobia and her formidable Durandal. Tension thickened in the air as the two duelists prepared themselves, their weapons drawn and unwavering gazes locked onto one another. Zenobia wielded her massive blade with unwavering confidence and unsettling ease, its enchantments pulsating with eager anticipation. Luna cracked her neck before crouching low, her claws catching the ambient light as she poised herself to strike, coiled like a spring. As the two contenders exchanged glares, Their competitive spirits ignited. Zenobia couldn't resist a sly taunt, her voice dripping with bravado. Lunageruha? I would have liked to fight a dragonborn, but I guess a wild mutt must do. Is that what you think? Luna shot back, her tone laced with disdain. Once I rip your head off, then maybe I'll finally see if it's as empty as your insults. Zenovia's chuckle resonated mysteriously within her full-face helmet. A rowdy pup, but a pup nonetheless. Let's see if your bite is as loud as your bark. With a calm and deliberate motion, Zenobia ran her gauntlet fingers across the blade of Durandal. The instant her touch met the enchanted steel, mystical flames unique to Dullahan's erupted to life, enveloping the massive sword in an ethereal blue fire as they danced with otherworldly grace. Without hesitation, perhaps slightly unnerved by Zenovia's fiery display, Luna muttered an incantation as her golden eyes seared. Triple Excel. As soon as the words left her lips, her form seemingly blurred from existence as her speed and strength tripled in an instant. The sheer suddenness and intensity of her transformation left the examinees in awe, as Triple Excel was a notoriously difficult and advanced technique that few could master. Zenovia's eyes gleamed with excitement from beneath her helmet as she witnessed and felt her opponent's new strength. She welcomed the challenge with open arms, her mystical flames flickering with anticipation. In this duel between a disciplined knight and a wild warrior, the arena was about to become a battleground where their skills, strength, and techniques would clash. And with that, Diodora raised his wand and shot a signal to start the duel. With a burst of speed, Luna closed the distance between them in a blur of motion. Her predatory instincts kicked into high gear as she clashed her razor-sharp claws against Zenovia's imposing blade, Durandal. The resounding clang sent sparks flying, casting a brief, dazzling display of light and shadow around them. The sly taunts they had exchanged earlier were forgotten as both fighters focused on the battle at hand. Amidst the frenetic exchange of blows, Luna's Triple Excel proved to be a formidable advantage. Her lightning-fast movements and relentless attacks left Zenobia struggling to maintain her composure. The wolf-like warrior's agility allowed her to strike from multiple angles, forcing Zenobia to constantly adjust her defenses. Zenobia, however, was no ordinary opponent. Her disciplined training as a knight had honed her combat skills to a razor's edge. She deftly parried Luna's most dangerous strike with Durandal, using her armor's enhanced durability to withstand the other blows. She utilized her enchanted sword not just as a weapon but as a shield against the she-wolf's attacks. The mystical flames that wreathed the blade danced with each parry, creating an almost mesmerizing spectacle for the spectators. Luna's speed was unmatched, however, her movements a gray blur as she struck from all directions, her claws leaving streaks of silver in her wake. With a swift spin, Zenobia unleashed a powerful horizontal slash that forced Luna to leap backward to avoid being cleaved in two. The ethereal flames of Durandal followed the arc of the blade, leaving a trail of sapphire fire in the air. Luna landed gracefully, her golden eyes locked onto her opponent. Her lips curled into a feral grin as she lunged forward again, claws extended like a predator closing in on its prey. Zenobia met her head-on, their weapons clashing with a resounding crash. The force of the impact sent shockwaves rippling across the ground, cracking the arena floor beneath them. Sweat glistened on Zenovia's forehead as she pushed back against Luna's relentless assault. The enchanted flames of Durandal burned brighter, and Zenovia's determination flared. With a powerful shove, she forced Luna back, creating a brief moment of distance between them. But Luna wasn't one to be deterred. She launched herself into the air, performing a series of acrobatic flips before descending toward Zenobia with incredible speed. Her claws gleamed like deadly talons as she aimed for her opponent's head. Zenobia raised Durandal just in time, the mystical flames roaring to life in a blinding display of power. Luna's claws met the enchanted blade with a deafening clash, sending sparks scattering in all directions. The impact created a shockwave that sent a shock of kinetic force rippling through the arena, trapped within the dome-like barrier. As the duel continued, Zenovia's experience as a knight began to shine through. She anticipated Luna's movements, her strikes becoming more controlled and precise. The flames of Durandal blazed with increasing intensity, casting eerie shadows across the arena, leaving craters each time it struck the ground. Frustration flickered in Luna's features as she struggled to breach Zenovia's unyielding defenses. Her relentless assaults had failed to make a dent in her opponent's armor, and exhaustion began to creep in. Luna darted around, her breaths coming in short gasps as she felt her stamina waning. Sensing Luna's hesitation, Zenovia couldn't resist a taunt. She planted Durandal into the ground and crossed her gauntlet arms. "Come on," she jeered. "Is that all you've got? I'll make you eat your own words." In a moment of desperate frustration, Luna snarled and decided to tap into her kin's strength. With a deep snarl, Luna's primal instincts took over, and she began to undergo a startling transformation. Her ashen gray hair grew longer and bristled like the mane of a wolf in its prime. Her claws extended further, gleaming like ivory daggers, and her golden eyes burned with an even fiercer intensity, its scaras turning blacker than ink. Zenovia raised an intrigued eyebrow, rage-ripping Durandal. "Oh!" With a primal growl, Luna unleashed her enhanced speed and strength, becoming a whirlwind of savage aggression. She moved with a feral grace, her movements even more lightning-fast than before. Her strikes came like a relentless storm, each one imbued with the primal fury of a wild beast. With a savage lunge, she managed to slice through a portion of Zenovia's armor, sending shards of enchanted metal clattering to the ground. Zenovia found herself hard-pressed to keep up with Luna's newfound power. The she-wolf's claws scraped against her armor, leaving shallow but telling marks. The mystical flames of Durandal roared with intensity, but Luna's relentless onslaught gradually began to strip away pieces of the knight's defense as they clatter uselessly across the field. The audience watched in awe as Luna pressed her advantage, gradually stripping Zenovia of her protective armor. Our hero, Issei, couldn't help but pay intense attention to the reveal that inside that hulking armor was actually a girl, with short blue hair and a rocking body. Nevertheless, the once imposing knight now stood exposed and vulnerable. The skin-tight battle suit she wore inside providing hardly any protection, and Zenovia's body was riddled with scars and red marks that oozed blood. The tide of the battle had shifted dramatically, and it was uncertain how much longer Zenovia could endure Luna's relentless assault. Battered and bruised and bloodied, Zenovia refused to yield. She managed to evade some of Luna's strikes, narrowly avoiding fatal blows. Her trusty blade still blazed with mystical flames, and she used it to parry and deflect Luna's attacks with pinpoint precision, grunting each time the claws found flesh. "Just need to hold on." Despite her exposed state, Zenovia's determination burned as brightly as her enchanted sword. As the duel raged on, it became increasingly clear that Luna's enhanced state was taking a toll on her. The Triple XL and her primal transformation were incredibly taxing, and her movements, while still lightning fast, showed signs of strain. Her once confident snarls were now mixed with grunts of exertion. Fatigue was setting in. And then it happened. Due to her exhaustion, Luna fumbled her steps in one of the many craters Durandal had left. With an agility that defied her battered state, Zenovia surged forth in a burst of speed, taking the werewolf by surprise. Her armor-clad boots barely made a sound as she shifted her weight, and with a mighty swing, she swung Durandal. The mystical flames that danced along the blade flared to life with renewed intensity, as if responding to her fervor. Zenovia yelled with all the strength she could muster, channeling it into that single, decisive strike. Rea! The resounding impact echoed through the arena like thunder, and time seemed to slow for a brief moment. Luna was sent hurtling sideways, her body like a projectile that crashed into the protective barrier with bone-rattling force. The very ground quivered beneath the shockwave of the collision, and dust and debris erupted into the air, obscuring the battlefield. Luna's head hung low, and she collapsed to the ground, her ashen-gray hair partially covering her features as they reverted back its normal state. The audience, who had been holding their breath, erupted into cheers and applause at the spectacle they had just witnessed. Zenovia stood tall, victorious, her sword held high in triumph. But the injuries she had sustained throughout the battle quickly caught up with her. She dropped to one knee, using Durandal as a makeshift crutch to support her weary form. She clutched her stomach, where red blood seeped from numerous wounds, breathing raggedly as she could barely keep herself awake. Diodora, who had been watching the battle with actual keen interest, raised his wand and fired the flare-like signal, ending the duel. Lunagaru is unable to continue. Zenobia Corda is the winner. His voice boomed throughout the arena, adding to the cacophony of cheers and applause. But of course, Luna would be accepted as well. She was a Garu for one. That fact alone was enough to secure her enrollment, but the academy had an appearance to maintain and Diodora was the perfect showman. The army of nurses, despite their sultry appearances that seemed to channel more nightclub than infirmary, exhibited a level of efficiency that was nothing short of remarkable. With swift and coordinated movements, they attended to the unconscious werewolf and the wounded Dullahan with precision and care. Luna was whisked away in an instant, her form vanishing in a magical teleportation, en route to the infirmary for further treatment. Zenobia was guided away from the battlefield by a team of nurses. They moved with practiced ease, supporting her as they led her toward the medical facilities for much-needed treatment. Meanwhile, on the sidelines, Issei joined in the applause heartily and sincerely, wondering if he could punch through the Dullahan's armor. However, he remained blissfully unaware that she was the same Dullahan who had challenged him to an arm wrestling contest earlier. The following day, after the whirlwind of the entrance exam and Diodora's enthralling acceptance speech, which had made even the most serious students wonder if they'd accidentally enrolled in a motivational seminar, the new students at the Arcane Academy of Belgazix found themselves blessed with a precious 5 days of relative freedom. This respite allowed them to navigate the uncharted waters of dormitory life, roommates included, before the formal commencement of their studies on the upcoming dreaded Monday. For many, this newfound freedom translated into a frenzied scramble to furnish their dorm rooms. Armed with a tape measure, bed linens, and a bewildering array of decorative pillows, they embarked on a mission to transform their barren, sterile chambers into cozy sanctuaries of academic solitude. Among this bustling throng of soon-to-be interior designers and feng shui experts, Issei stood out as the quintessential daydreamer. His aspirations for dormitory life were woven with threads of idealized romance, as was typical of him. He harbored secret hopes of sharing his room with a girl, ideally Tiamat or Asia, though he couldn't help but ponder the repercussions of rooming with the werewolf girl. After all, he really wanted to touch those fluffy ears, even if it meant risking a bite mark on his hand. As for the Dullahan girl whose name he'd committed to the void of forgetfulness, he considered her a mystery worth exploring. X something was her name, an enigmatic moniker befitting her status. In his imaginative fantasies, he painted scenarios of cozy late-night chats under the soft glow of arcane lamps, shared study sessions that somehow led to profound revelations about life, love, and quadratic equations, and other vague romantic notions that he couldn't quite articulate due to his limited interaction with the outside world. With the unwavering optimism of an amateur romantic, he clung to the tiniest glimmer of possibility, believing that perhaps, just maybe, some form of enchanting romance might blossom amidst the arcane knowledge of the academy. In his mind, he'd boldly claim his first harem member, even if the fine print of reality remained shrouded in mystery. However, as he opened the door of his designated room, clutching his paltry bag of clothes that mostly consisted of the same colored shirts or shirts with stupid text on them and sport shorts, his dreams of cozy late-night chats and shared study sessions with a mysterious, enchanting roommate were promptly shattered. There, already occupying the room, lay another person on their bed across from Issei's, and it was undeniably a guy. Or, he considered, a very tomboyish girl with a flat chest, in which case, Issei would immediately apologize. But there was no mistaking it. This young man had short, disheveled dirty blonde hair and a pair of gray eyes that clearly belonged to the male persuasion. Issei's disappointment hung in the air like a heavy cloud, and he let out an audible sigh. Oh, the knot girl, who was decidedly Issei's new roommate, remarked with an annoyed squint of his eyes, "How rude. What? Don't tell me you weren't hoping for a girl roommate yourself?" The still knot girl raised an eyebrow at Issei's admission. He paused for a moment, then relented with a grin. Alright, fine. I was also hoping you were a girl, but hey, we're stuck with each other now, so better make the best of it. Yeah, you're right. Issei perked up a bit from the friendly tone. I'm Hayate Issei, by the way. Haido, I guess. Aha, I've heard about you. The nice person extended a hand with a smile. Genshuru Saji, I'm also from Nippon. Nice to meet you, Haido. We're both representing our hometown here, so we gotta have each other's backs, right? Hell yeah, Issei responded enthusiastically as he shook Saji's hand, feeling a bit better about the situation. Maybe having a male roommate wouldn't be so bad after all. Looking around, Issei noticed that the room was twice as big as his bedroom, with a mini table set in the middle, placed just by the window overlooking the impressive courtyard. The dorm room was well-furnished, cool, accommodating, and yet a far cry to his cozy cabin in the woods. Instead of the scent of the trees and plants, the air was rich with an unnaturally calming scent. Instead of the rowdy owls or chirpy crickets, now his ambience was filled with the subtle hum of manna flowing naturally around them. This would be his new room for the next couple of years. Might as well try it out. As the two roommates exchanged introductions and pleasantries, the initial awkwardness began to melt away like ice cream on a hot summer day. While unpacking his modest belongings and organizing his personal space with the precision of a seasoned Tetris player, they both quickly realized that they had more in common than they initially thought. They both hailed from Nippon, navigating the treacherous seas of unfamiliarity in a school brimming with unfamiliar faces, sported wardrobes that were a testament to minimalist fashion, shared an enthusiastic interest in video games, and possessed a penchant for staying up late to watch delightfully cheesy monster movies that left their minds both entertained and thoroughly puzzled. So, what's your story, Issei? Issei inquired, momentarily glancing up from his light novel titled, Quit Staring at Me, That's Rude. What got you here, is what I'm asking. He thought for a moment, processing. Danzydanz said he shouldn't tell anyone about their holds deal. My fists, Issei bluntly responded. Technically it wasn't a lie. That drew a chuckle from Saji. Well, I can already see that. I'm asking why you are here. Like prestige? Fame? Parental demands? Or something else? Girls? Huh. Girls? What? I want girlfriends, Issei elaborated, which didn't do so much elaborating. Plural. Saji raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting that answer. He blinked a few times, trying to process Issei's straightforward and somewhat surprising response. He shouldn't be surprised, really. After all, this was the sicko that punted his fellow dragonborn like she was a baseball. Girls, Issei repeated with a casual shrug. I'm here to get myself a harem. You know, a group of lovely ladies who adore me. Bah! Saji couldn't help but burst into laughter at the sheer audacity and honesty of Issei's statement. Well, that's a unique goal for attending an arcane academy, I'll give you that. But to each their own. Issei grinned, relieved that Saji didn't react negatively to his admission. Damn it. What about you, Saji? You don't have harem ambitions? Nah, Saji replied with a wave of his hand. I've got a girlfriend already. Oh damn. I should learn from you then. Easy now. I'm no Romeo. But let me tell you this. Keeping one girl content is like trying to preserve ice cream in a heatwave. In my case, quite literally. He paused for a moment, then added with a wry smile, my girlfriend is a Yukiana, by the way. Issei grinned, genuinely interested by Saji's revelation. Damn, a Yukiana? You must really have a thing for cold shoulders. Saji chuckled, appreciating Issei's sense of humor. Well, it's not every day you meet someone who can freeze you with just a glance. Our first date was literally ice cold. How did you guys meet? Well, I met her when I was hiking Mount Fuji. It was icy at first, but melting her frosty exterior had its quirks, I'm not gonna lie. Issei nodded eagerly, wondering if he should equip himself with a portable hairdryer in case he needed to melt a frosty exterior. Whatever that meant. Is she in this school? Saji nodded. Yep, she got in. Remember the girl who turned the whole arena into a winter wonderland? That's her. Recognition flashed across Issei's face. Oh yeah, I remember now. I never thought someone could whip up a blizzard like that. She must be a crazy strong sorceress, he mused, his thoughts momentarily focused on her incredible power before his intrusive thoughts trailed his focus off track again. So, does she make ice cream for dessert? Saji laughed heartily. Nah, but she does have a thing for snow cones. Issei nodded eagerly, making a mental note to get some snow cone recipes in case he ever needed to impress a snow woman, Nipponese or Westernese. I wonder if I can punch a storm, Issei mused, his imagination running wild. That got Saji to blurt out an amused snort. Well, hi, you've punched a dragon before, so why not take a swing at a storm next? Over the course of the next few days, they settled into their dorm room and transformed it into a space that reflected their unique personalities. Issei's side featured a small shrine to his favorite anime and manga characters, complete with posters and action figures. Saji, on the other hand, had a collection of antique books and a vintage vinyl record player, which gave the room a touch of old-world charm. On a particularly uneventful afternoon, while Issei and Saji were engrossed in discussions about the optimal placement for Saji's flat-screen TV, their door burst open without warning, causing both of them to leap from their seats in surprise. In the doorway stood the she-wolf, Luna Geru, her tan and toned stomach prominently displayed by her choice of attire, a tank top and jacket with half-thigh shorts, a sight that immediately seized Issei's attention. "Oh, wolf girl," he immediately exclaimed. "Is knocking no longer a thing here?" While Saji couldn't help but grumble, choosing not to care since this might be interesting. Her golden eyes blazed with determination as Luna Geru scanned the room. It was clear that she was on a mission, and she had her sights set on someone specific. "Issei, how you do?" Luna's voice was resolute as she called out, her tone leaving no room for argument. The man in question blinked, caught off guard by her sudden entrance and the commanding tone she had used. That's me. How can I help you?" Luna's intense golden gaze remained unwavering as she focused on him. "I've heard that you've mastered the key technique despite you're just a human. I want to get stronger, and I want you to teach me that. Take me as your pupil." Issei exchanged a surprised glance with Saji, his initial bewilderment giving way to curiosity. "You want me to teach you key techniques?" Luna nodded firmly. "That's right. I saw your battle with Tiamat, and I want to learn how to harness that kind of power." Issei nodded cautiously meanwhile in his mind. What the hell is key technique? He'd be happy to teach anyone anything. The only problem was that Issei had about as much knowledge of ki as a goldfish had of operating a magic cannon. Despite his interest in Luna, he didn't want to spin a web of lies just to get a chance to get closer to her. Felt scummy. He didn't want to be scummy. "I doubt it's something easily teachable," Saji added his tuichel, "the world's universal currency. Otherwise, everyone and their mother would have had it." "But he has it," Luna pointed out, her tail swaying impatiently. "A devil has it as well. There must be a way to learn it." Issei's response, though well-intentioned, came out like a fumbled magic trick. "Teach you ki? Well, you see, it's a bit like trying to teach a dolphin to tap dance underwater. I mean, I have no idea where to start, really." Luna's unwavering golden gaze shifted from determination to momentary disappointment, and then annoyance. She interpreted Issei's reply as him brushing off her request. "So, I'm not worth your time, is that it?" Panicking, Issei waved his hands frantically, nearly smacking himself in the face. No, it's not that at all. I'm a key novice myself. I couldn't teach you even if I tried." "A novice?" Luna took a step closer, her eyes narrowing as she folded her gloved hands. "I see. If you won't teach me, I'll show you that I'm worth your time. I'll become powerful that you won't have a choice but to accept me as your pupil. Good day. And sorry for not knocking." With those words, Luna stormed out of the room, leaving Issei bewildered and more confused than ever about this elusive key technique. Saji muttered. "She's surprisingly mild-mannered, for a werewolf." With that casual speciesism, Issei scratched the back of his head, struggling to understand this mysterious key technique Luna was referring to. The truth was, he had no idea that the blazing steam his body shot out during intense battles was the embodiment of his fighting spirit, or ki, a feat achieved by punching through his human limits. Deep within the heart of the lush, verdant forest, a mischievous
Okay, sadly the chapter is over. And if you enjoyed, just leave a like and subscribe with post notification, so when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.